Rebuilding Connecticut is a challenge unlike any we've ever faced. Tax hikes and unchecked government spending will hurt our recovery. They won't make the state more affordable, bring back jobs, or attract new businesses. We can rebuild our economy and get people back to work. But that means taking a different approach, working together to unlock opportunities and the state's tremendous potential. Find out which leaders stand with you and your local small businesses at rebuildct.com.
We have been occupied by the British. We've survived recessions, depressions, prohibition, and even previous pandemics. But this is our greatest challenge. We'll survive because of our staff, our community, and our bank. When the PPP program was announced by the U.S. Treasury, it was Webster that educated us and executed for us. We will emerge stronger and better, and our customers will come home.
Happy Friday morning, everyone. I'm Chris DiPentima, the President and CEO of the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. Welcome to the 2021 Economic Summit and Outlook, hosted by CBIA and our great friends at the Metro Hartford Alliance, and made possible again this year through the generous support of Webster Bank. We have a terrific lineup of speakers and panelists this morning, all addressing a common theme: the historic opportunity to reimagine Connecticut, to open doors on new possibilities, to capitalize on the state's many strengths and rebuild our economy, more vibrant and robust than before. Connecticut has tremendous opportunities that we must capitalize on, that we cannot let pass by. I'm bullish on Connecticut, on the state's potential to bounce back from the pandemic and realize our true potential. What's fueling that optimism? Not the least are Connecticut's world-class companies and highly skilled, highly productive workforce. Consider that despite the pandemic, and perhaps because of it, we saw a record number of business startups in the state in 2020. People are now moving into Connecticut because of the pandemic. And the latest income tax revenue projections essentially wipe out this year's fiscal budget deficit and took a significant bite out of the forecasted shortfalls that we face in the next 2 years. Connecticut is a leader in the COVID-19 jobs recovery. Through November, 65% of those who lost their jobs last March and April have returned to work. Not to mention the state's GDP rebounded in the third quarter of last year, with our economy expanding 33%. We're all in this together, and together we can chart a new path for Connecticut. In a few minutes, you'll hear from Governor Ned Lamont. The governor will outline his policy agenda for the 2020 legislative session, including his plans to close the projected 2-year multi-billion-dollar budget deficit, promote economic growth, and streamline state government operations. And who knows, maybe Bernie Sanders will join us this morning as well. At 9:45, we'll talk with a bipartisan group of state legislators, each of whom signed CBIA's Rebuilding Connecticut Policy Pledge. And our keynote speaker, Pfizer Biopharmaceuticals Group President Angela Hwang, will be here at 11:15 to share the incredible story of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine development, how the company is distributing the vaccine across the country and the world, and the impact on public health and the economy. And later in the program, you'll hear from some of the key players building Connecticut's innovation landscape. They're going to walk us through the spaces, the industries, the communities that are essential in pushing Connecticut forward as a hub of new ideas and entrepreneurship. Here's a quick preview of what to expect later this morning.
What we do is provide the opportunities for connections. The whole idea of district, and even in the logo of district, you have the different connections with the D and the R, which is meant to represent the types of collisions that can happen on a campus like this. So what we do is we cultivate the community and we curate the experience here and provide opportunities, events, social events, so that they can then make those introductions. And of course we facilitate some of those. Like, we love to connect people. One of the ways that we see an opportunity to contribute is in workforce development and software engineering, because of all of the available software engineering jobs in the state. And we know that businesses are going to go where the talent is. But we also know, living in New Haven, that we have really competent, capable students and people who don't have the access or means to even have an entryway. The reason behind our nonprofit, the Whole Burton School partnership that we've wrapped into our nonprofit of District Arts and Education is basically preparing people for skills in the 20th century. I think providing a space that's safe and inclusive for people, whether they're 17 or 70, to walk in and have access to a software engineering program, I think is huge.
You'll hear more from JoHannah Hamilton and her counterparts at Reset, StamfordNext, and Upward Hartford at 10:30. And we also want to hear from you today, so please use the chat box at any time to post your questions for our speakers and panelists. Joining us now is longtime CBIA board member and the chairman, president, and CEO of Webster Bank, John Ciulla. John also represents Webster on the national stage, serving on the Federal Reserve System's Federal Advisory Council. Webster is a terrific corporate citizen and a champion of Connecticut, something we're committed to highlighting at CBIA. And we are grateful for the company's long-standing partnership with CBIA and for their continued generous support of this event. John, good morning. Great to see you, buddy.
Morning, Chris. Great to see you as well. Thank you for that nice introduction.
Happy New Year.
We all have confidence that you'll take CBIA to the next level. Good morning, everyone. I wish we could all be physically together, but I'm glad this great annual event is taking place despite the challenges of the pandemic. Just a quick note on the video, if you happen to catch it, that was playing before we started. The Griswold Inn, an iconic venue, is just one of the many businesses in Connecticut that Webster and so many other banks in the state were able to help navigate through these extraordinary times. The way the industry came together to make tens of thousands of PPP loans for billions of dollars in a short period of time is something all bankers should be proud of. And the industry is back at it again. We're on day 3 of processing the second round of PPP loans. And at Webster, we've received nearly 3,000 applications for almost $300 million in loan proceeds. And think about that. That's happening with every bank in every state in the country. So there's obviously still some significant need out there. I love this event, and I want to first thank Chris and CBIA and David and the Metro Hartford Alliance for keeping us focused on important business and hosting the event this year despite the macro environment. Webster is proud once again to sponsor the Economic Summit, a yearly gathering that provides a venue for the sharing of great information and brings together legislators and the business community to talk about the state of our economy, challenges, and I think most importantly, as Chris mentioned, kind of come up with positive solutions to those challenges that will benefit all the residents of the state. I'm also looking forward to hearing from Angela Hwang of Pfizer, who will talk to us real time on the amazing development and ongoing distribution of the COVID vaccine. What a year since we last met in January of 2020. The worst healthcare crisis of our lifetime, the related economic fallout, what we hope to be the inflection point to racial equality, an incredibly divisive political environment, ending what I think was the most embarrassing moment I've witnessed as an American, the events of 2 weeks ago in DC, and a myriad of other challenges. But we're hopeful that with the rollout of the vaccines, continued economic recovery, helped by more stimulus, and completion this week of a peaceful transition in Washington, that 2021 will be the turning point we're looking for. We had our earnings call yesterday, and while the financial results were quite good, the slide in our earnings presentation that I was most proud of was the full page that listed all the things we did and are still doing to help our employees, our customers, and our communities during the pandemic. As an essential business, we kept employees safe and provided flexibility and support for those that needed it. We continued to provide needed services and products to our customers, as well as needed payment relief, fee reductions, and additional capital through PPP and other direct and government lending programs. And all the banks in Connecticut ceased foreclosures during this difficult time. And we targeted philanthropic dollars to those that need it most. And you know what? It's not just Webster, it's every business in every industry in Connecticut. We all did the exact same thing. The business community in Connecticut has stepped up and we should be very proud of that. I'm honored to be able to introduce Governor Ned Lamont this morning. I said earlier that this event brings legislators and business community together to address Connecticut's economy. It reminds me that Governor Lamont has stressed public-private partnership as a key foundation of his administration from the very start. I joke often that Governor Lamont spoke at my very first press conference, which took place 2 years ago Wednesday, right after his inauguration. Obviously, it was me that had the pleasure of attending and speaking at his first press conference, and I've had none since. But the serious point here is that the governor, on one of his first days in office, reached out to Webster and the banking industry, Tom Mongello and the Connecticut Bankers Association to find a way to provide interest-free financing to furloughed government workers. He knew that he could do it more quickly and more effectively by reaching out to the private sector. And he's done it on many occasions, including addressing crumbling foundations and other significant issues. Just last week, I had the pleasure of facilitating a Zoom call with Governor and 400 banking executives from across the country, where he provided great insights into managing through the pandemic, vaccine distribution, and regional cooperation. All of those bankers across all 50 states were looking to Connecticut and Governor Lamont. Governor Lamont and his team took swift action at the outset of the pandemic. They made difficult choices, collaborated with their regional peers, but in the end, I believe that he differentiated from his regional peers and set Connecticut apart by keeping manufacturing safely running and prudently finding spots to keep retail and services economies going. So important, but while always prioritizing public health. At the end, outcomes in Connecticut with respect to the virus and economic impact are better than our regional peers. And we are differentiating from other states on vaccine distribution, as you know. I keep getting different stats, and the governor may tell me we're number one, but I know we're in the top 2 or 3 in the country in terms of population vaccinated. The governor has many challenges ahead of him beyond getting us through the pandemic, recharging the state's economy, solving for long-term financial challenges, and keeping us competitive from a business standpoint. And I'm sure he'd rather be working full-time on those issues than dealing with the pandemic. I should also note that this week, Ned was named co-chair of the National Governors Association Pandemic and Disaster Response Task Force. Congratulations, Governor, on that great honor. Governor, thank you for joining us today and for your leadership during this extraordinary time. Look forward to your comments.
I guess that's me. Hey, John, thank you. First of all, you're my Zoom brother. I see you on Zoom. That's where we get together. And I want to appreciate what Webster's done, and more broadly, the business community have been amazing partners throughout this, as you say, incredibly complicated year. And Chris, to you and CBIA, thank you for being a champion for Connecticut. I loved your introduction there. And if we don't believe in our state, if we're not champions for our state, if we're not optimistic about our state, optimism is contagious, and so's the alternative. And we've got to continue to work like this. John, talked a little bit about what I'll be the governor's liaison down there with the White House COVID task force and working on behalf of other governors, along with Bill Lee from Tennessee. Let me tell you, what we need to do when it comes to the vaccinations, we have a race. We have a race against this highly infectious strain that is hitting Europe pretty hard and forcing some renewed lockdowns. I do not want that happening in America. I certainly don't want that happening in Connecticut. That makes the vaccinations all the more important. Connecticut has done, as John kindly said, pretty well when it comes to the vaccinations we receive. We get them administered. That's a shot in the arm. And we're pretty good at that. And the federal government and HHS recognized that this week, and they gave us actually an extra 50,000 doses. And just as a way of saying, if Connecticut can put the vaccines to work, we can get you a little more vaccine. But that is the stumbling block right now, is getting additional vaccines. And Washington has done so much better on vaccinations than they did on PPE, which is every state you're on your own, and good luck if you can get a phone call back from China. This time around, they did bulk purchasing, prepaid, long-term contracts. That's all good news. But it is still a black box to the governors. And we know that we're getting almost 50,000 doses a week. We being Connecticut, every state, it's pretty much on a per capita basis. And we have sort of 1 week window in terms of what's going on there. And so far, I got to tell you, the feds have delivered, for Connecticut anyway, what they said they were going to do on time. I think you've heard some war stories from other states where that was not necessarily the case, or other states that had a hard time getting the vaccine administered. But here's, do me a favor. I was on the phone yesterday, Josh and I, with leaders from Pfizer, thankfully an anchor tenant here in Connecticut, and leaders when it comes to vaccine. But the whole vaccine distribution, manufacturing, supply chain is a black box. And that's one of the things I'm going to prioritize when I get a chance to work with the COVID group down in Washington. Ask them. Pfizer has said, look, we could maybe double production in the next 30 to 40 days. We could double production again in the next 30 to 40 days. Confirm that for me, will you? That would allow us to plan accordingly going forward and just be absolutely invaluable. Same with Moderna. As you know, J&J is supposed to be coming out probably in the next 3 weeks or so. They've had some, manufacturing issues, but not big ones. They're doing pretty well. And while they're not going to produce as much, remember, that's a 1-dose vaccine, unlike Pfizer and Moderna. So they'll get twice the bang for the buck, or we will. Lots of discussions about who gets prioritized. Remember, 6 weeks ago, it was all about you can't make me get a vaccine. No way. No mandates. 6 weeks later, I can tell you, everybody has seen the pictures. People have seen the fact that Connecticut was the first in the country to get all of their nursing homes their first vaccine. Our hospitals are almost all done. You've seen those videos. We tried to give people a sense of confidence that it's safe and effective. And I think we're making pretty good progress on that front. My problem right now is, how do you prioritize? CDC said, hey, how about everybody, unless they're really young and really healthy? So that didn't help us prioritize when I've only got 50,000 vaccines a week. I'd love your feedback on this, but right now we have said, look, obviously those 1A folks, healthcare priority. I think you know why. Keep our capacity in our hospitals. And right now we have good capacity in our hospitals. That was not always the case around the country, or even for Connecticut for a week or two there in the spring. 75 and over, and then 65 and over. Easy to administer. People want to get vaccinated. And I think you'll find that 65 and over represent about 18% of the Connecticut population, and about 88% of the fatalities and complications, and what that involves in terms of hospitalization and the such. Depending on how fast we get those vaccines, we broaden that lens into a broader group of essential workers, and working with our hospitals to see who has some of those pre-existing conditions that could be most at risk. We're not going to get our economy back until we give people that confidence that they can get back to work. And as John kindly pointed out, we do have, compared to our peer states, more of our economy open. We never closed down, manufacturing and construction. We didn't pay a price for that. Our infection rates went down and our economy kept going. But it's still dicey out there. I look at the revenue numbers every week, right next to COVID infection numbers, in terms of seeing how we're doing. And we're doing relatively well on that front. For me, going back 2 years ago, new governor, they said, what is your number one priority for this first legislative session? And given the mess that our budget had been going back a long time, given the mess I thought that our budget had been just in that last budget, it took them 4 or 5 months to get it passed. It had a built-in deficit in the billions of dollars. Rating agencies, lowered our rating. It just sent a terrible signal. Remember that? What's wrong with Connecticut? So for me, a big priority was just an honestly balanced budget on time. It was not as sexy as, some other things, but and so far we've done relatively well. we were one of the very few states to end the last fiscal year, July 1, with a small surplus, paid down a tiny bit of our pension obligations. So far, it looks like we're going to have a bigger surplus at the end of this fiscal year, July 1, and that's good news. And also, we continue to have our rainy day fund intact. A lot of people have lots of ideas on how to spend the rainy day fund, but I think it's served us well that way. And it means I don't have to rely on broad tax increases. I don't have to slash social services in the next biennium, which are the next 2 years of budgets we've got. I'm eternally cautious at this point, just because in COVID time, things can change dramatically. I think I mentioned to you the idea that this highly infectious South African British strain, if that catches, what that could mean to our public health and what that could mean to our economy. But in the meantime, I think we're doing pretty well. And I think I know how we're going to get to June 30. And I think you and the business community ought to have some confidence that we'll have a lot more clarity, in terms of COVID and vaccinations over the course of the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. That's why our schools are reopening again. That's not true of a lot of other states. To me, it was absolutely vital. For these kids not to have a classroom option even for the last 6 months in many of these towns, or some of these towns, was just breaking my heart. And what it also means broadly to our economy, so that people, parents, single moms, dads can get to work and know their kids are learning and know their kids are safe. So we still have a higher percentage there. We opened up sports just a couple of days ago. I know how frustrating that was to people, but we were finding that, high school sports, it wasn't what was happening on the hockey rink, but was that drive to the hockey rink and locker rooms. It was just flaring things up in Boston and other places. But I think Connecticut's earned the right to slowly reopen there as well. So I'd like to think that we are getting back to a new normal with the notes of caution we've got. And finally, just to follow it up on what Chris said, we have to continue to play to our strengths. And I think that silver lining in COVID is it's reminded a lot of people what makes Connecticut so special. And that's why tens of thousands of people are moving to this state, many from New York for the first time in a generation. This may not be the last time that we have to quarantine. If you have to quarantine, having a little backyard is a big plus compared to that, apartment down in New York, or if you can telecommute, and if you can drive, if you don't have to go into an elevator, if you don't have to go into a subway, those are pluses for the Connecticut lifestyle. I think that a lot of people recognize that it's one of the most beautiful states in the country. We have beaches, we have mountains, or pretty good mountains, and a park within 10 or 15 minutes from just about everybody in the state. What outdoor means, especially in COVID, we always kept them open. I think those are reasons people are moving back to Connecticut. I'd like to think that there's a sense that we're getting our fiscal house in order. Believe me, we got a lot of work to do. But I'd like to think that we're, as they say in healthcare, bending the curve. And finally, I think you're going to spend a little bit of time on this, and I'll leave you, is just workforce. Our greatest competitive strength has always been the quality of our workforce. And we've got to double down on that. And we got to make sure that people are trained for the jobs that are out there. And they're working with CBIA, Metro Hartford, Chris, David, and each and every one of you. Give us a better window into the job skills you need. I got to make darn sure that nobody leaves the state because they couldn't find the worker they needed who had the job skills they needed. And I know it's changed a little bit, and maybe a year and a half ago we were trying to fill advanced manufacturing and other jobs that were going begging. We're going to announce today that part of our workforce team, we took 300 waiters and baristas and have turned them into nurses so that we can meet the demand of the moment. And the moment right now may be in terms of public health and healthcare, but the moment for Connecticut going on for the next few years, I'm going to make sure that our workforce is there. I'll be rolling out some more information on that today and up through the budget address in a couple of weeks. How's that, Chris?
Really appreciate you being here this morning. Those are some great comments. I really loved your comment about workforce and not taking our foot off the gas, right, Governor? And that's critical. While we've had record unemployment, we're going to come out of this, and we're going to come out of this stronger and better. And so it's critical that we don't get complacent around workforce. We continue to work our structural issues around the fiscal house, as you mentioned. We're getting great money in from the feds, but we still got to solve our long-term issues. So I really appreciate your thoughts around how do we do that, Governor? How do we keep our foot on the gas in some of those things and not get complacent?
One idea on workforce. Feds are, putting a lot of cash at work, as you maybe noticed that. As a business guy, that would make me really nervous. As a governor, I sort of appreciate it right now. The more flexibility they give us, the better. They've given us a fair amount of money in and around education, for which I'm so appreciative. It's pretty darn expensive opening up a school in the middle of a pandemic, by the way. But one of the things that we're allowed to do is use some of that money to train people for the next group of jobs that are out there right now. And there we're going to be aggressive in starting up pilot programs, starting up certificate programs. Not everybody needs 2 years or 4 years. Sometimes 18 or 24-week program. Working with you, tell us how to put that together. We can train these people right now. And sadly, there are a lot of people out there. You got a high unemployment rate. We got a lot of people who are changing what they do over the next 6 months. And we're going to put resources behind that and energy behind that to make sure you've got the people you need.
And kudos to you for the governor creating the Governor's Workforce Council. That has been a fantastic public-private partnership, education, business sector. That's a home run, and the strategy plan that they came up with, we're going to help execute that, Governor. Governor, we got a couple questions in the chat box. Thank you first for asking me to join the 20-person Vaccine Advisory Committee. One of the questions is, when do we think the 65 to 74-year-old age group will be able to register for the vaccine?
A few weeks. I wish it was faster than that. And as I sort of implied, that's based upon the assumption we're going to continue to get 50,000 vaccines a week. If that changes, and find out from Angela, maybe it will change, we can vastly accelerate. We got the capacity to vaccinate 5 times as many people. So give us the vaccine, we'll put it to work, and that will allow us to expand the pool of people.
That's great, and I know the business community is looking to maybe be able to register at towards the end of February, so exciting times, Governor. Another question, obviously the minority-owned community has been devastated by COVID, and so what plans do we have to support the small, Black-owned businesses in Connecticut as they rebuild from their losses and we rebuild Connecticut?
Small businesses in general and women and minority-owned businesses in particular have been slammed. They don't have a lot of capital to weather a storm like this. We got to do everything we can to keep them going. So, David Lehman put in place the short-term grants. We handed out $5,000 grants to 10,000 companies in the last month. We've also got a bigger grants for larger companies, a little focus on the restaurant and the hospitality because they were hit so hard. Chris, we couldn't provide everything to everybody, but we could provide a bridge to the Paycheck Protection Program, which John mentioned. It's a little clunky. It's out there now. Apply again. Connecticut punched way above its weight class last time. Work with your local community banks. Work with your traditional lenders. Get at the front of that line, because I think that's going to buy us the time until the vaccines really make a difference.
Thanks for that, Governor. Governor, this next question is on the minds, I'll tell you, of our business members as well. When I've reached out to folks across Connecticut, transportation and infrastructure is the one thing that people come back. And I know we tried before with the tolls, but everyone wants to solve transportation and infrastructure. And I guess we all have different ideas about how to go about it. We're hoping we'll get some federal dollars, and maybe you could comment on that. I know you have a great relationship with the new, President Biden, but what updates do we have around transportation and infrastructure and solving that?
I tell you that, first of all, the transportation fund is going broke. I think you can see why people are driving less. Price of gasoline is down. So it's just one of those things that Hartford hates to solve, but we have to solve it. You know, in the meantime, I can tell you that we got pretty good federal support last year and this coming year. Chris, it's a little ironic that we were able to repair things at 30% less cost because we're able to do it often during the day and not at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're able to close down a lane because of a lot less traffic. Maybe we've learned something about how to do this even more efficiently going forward. I think you're going to see Connecticut get an additional $200+ million out of federal support. So we're in good shape. We don't have to slow things down. We don't have to slow up state of good repair. But I still say shame on Connecticut. The feds are going to come up with an infrastructure bill, which is transportation, a broadband, a green technology, and it's going to be 80-20 or 90-10. And we have to show we have a revenue stream that we can pay for our 20% share on that. And you're right. I came up with some ideas last time that went over like a lead balloon. I didn't like the other guy's ideas either, which was borrow $700 million a year or take the money from the rainy day fund. So weigh in. I mean, I need a problem solvers caucus who can not just complain from the sidelines, but say, here's how I would solve the problem. And CBIA can really help me take the lead on this. And if we can do this with transportation, we can do this with maybe pensions and other big knotty problems that have festered in this state for too long.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say, Governor, this is one of our top priorities for this year, a bipartisan solution to the transportation and infrastructure. So that, that's critical to growing our state. That's critical to us being better and stronger than before. And I'm happy to say we did sit down with your folks this past week. We're throwing things up against the wall, coming up with different solutions. And again, that public-private partnership, that's the way we're going to solve these. So I appreciate you inviting us in and helping us be at the table, be in the room where it happens, right? The next question, a little swing here, Governor, is the nonprofits have been challenged since the Medicaid rate was bumped up. And we've advocated doing more with the nonprofits, right? Maybe doing some more state services and utilizing the nonprofits. How do you envision supporting the nonprofits as we rebuild Connecticut?
Well, in the near term, with the federal support, we got the nonprofits an additional $100 million because they weren't telecommuting. They were taking care of folks on the front line. They were taking care of people with intellectual disabilities. They couldn't dial it in. And for that, they were extraordinary partners for us. Now with the vaccine rollout, we're working closely again with the not-for-profit community. And we're going to be able to provide additional funding out of the CARES Act funding to keep our not-for-profits going. So this is our bridge over the course of the next 6-12 months. To be blunt, I fuss less about the amount of money I get from the feds and more about phase it in over a period of time. Don't make us spend it all by December 31st. Give us some flexibility. I can make that money go to work in a much more significant way. But anyway, like the business community, the not-for-profits have been amazing partners for us. And they're going to play a bigger, not a smaller role in state government as we go forward, because I have a heck of a lot of people retiring. So I got to figure out the most efficient way to deliver services.
And we've heard from the business community, Governor, that they really want to help the nonprofits as well and the minority-owned businesses. And so we're going to work really hard at CBIA to try to connect those businesses who want to do something great for their community and always are invested with those nonprofits. So we'll work hard at that as well, Governor. Governor, the next question goes back to the Workforce Council and workforce development, and it's around funding, right? The Governor's Workforce Council came up with a 50-page plan, very thorough, incredible ideas in there around reforming the education system, programs that will root people who come to Connecticut in their cities so they stay in Connecticut. How do we fund that? How do we fund the Workforce Council plan or the priorities around workforce development this year?
Well, this year I'm feeling pretty confident. We got $400 million from the feds for K through 12. So a lot of those high school programs, you start getting your certificate, save you some time, hit the ground running upon graduation. And we're going to get probably 250 million for colleges and universities. Tell the legislators, I know they're coming on next, hey, we'll help you spend that money. The feds are pretty directive about how that money is to be spent. So it's not like I have total free reign there, but I do have the capacity to direct some of that money to workforce development. And I've said before, Chris, my priority is looking at those certificate programs, expanding, thinking a little bit more broadly about how we reform our community colleges. It breaks my heart. 80% of the people starting community college don't graduate. So how can I come up with a curriculum that makes sense? So it's not a matter of all new money, but it's a matter of reform. And this is the year to do it. And we're going to be able to put significant resources, COVID-related resources behind this because we're transforming our workforce.
Career Pathways, Governor, is a huge opportunity for us in Connecticut, and our affiliate, Ready CT, works really closely with a lot of the school systems, especially in Hartford, to develop those career pathways. As you said, not everyone's destined for college. I believe it's about a third of our 30,000 high school graduates each year don't go to the military and don't go on to college. That's a huge opportunity to fill these job opportunities that we have in manufacturing, financial services, computer services. So, kudos to you again for creating the Governor's Workforce Council. I think we can get the funds that we need to. I know the manufacturing community has called for a refunding of the Manufacturing Innovation Fund, which partially funds incumbent worker training, again, as well as the apprentice program. Any thoughts around that? You think that those are programs we could continue to fund and should continue to fund in Connecticut?
I do. Another one that I like and we're working on is give your businesses a tax credit if they forgive a student loan. They hire somebody from Connecticut, they stay on for 3 or 5 years, we'll credit you so that you have an incentive to hire. We can get rid of a lot of this student debt out there right now. I think those other programs make a lot of sense. Look, we've created, and Kerry, we got this workforce group. It's a freestanding group. We've never had that before. They're domiciled over at DECD right now. And we're going to expand that. But it doesn't work for government to do this by ourselves. If you just have some government guy, saying, this is what you need, that never works. We're going to follow your lead on this, Chris.
That's great, Governor. And as you know, I spent the last 18 years in manufacturing. The creation of the Chief Manufacturing Officer position that Colin Cooper fills, working with David Lehman at DECD, Governor, that has been a home run. Again, a poster child for what public-private partnership can do. And there's a question from the manufacturing community about all the money they've spent on personal protective equipment and organizing their facilities to be COVID safe. And this really goes beyond manufacturers. Any thoughts about what we can do to help folks with the expenses they've incurred, whether it's been PPE or COVID workplace compliance? I know one of our legislative priorities this year is maybe the unintended consequence of expanding the sales and use tax. If you buy personal protective equipment, you get taxed on it. You also get taxed on training as well. And maybe, we all didn't know COVID would happen when we expanded the sales and use tax. And obviously that kind of disencourages folks from acquiring PPE. So any thoughts you have on helping the business community with all the expenses they've incurred?
Yeah, right now we are a backup for you. So we have a stockpile, and the feds actually have a stockpile now. It is the private sector's role to provide for themselves. We're going to make sure that nobody gets left off. That's fact number one. But I think the most important thing I could have done for manufacturing was keep them open. What I've got a lot of capacity on is testing and make that available so your folks can get tested on the way into the factory floor. We're rolling out the vaccines very soon. And yeah, the idea of, no tax on PPE, it's that's an easy one. Make it just a little bit easier for people.
And it has a very small fiscal note, Governor. And again, we'll work with your team to, and that's the key, right? We need fiscal stability here in Connecticut. Governor, the next one comes from the cities and towns, and it asks, is there a way that the towns and cities can work with the state to be a training ground for the unemployed, and their salaries may be underwritten by the state, until positions open up with the community. There's been a lot of talk about people being displaced in some industries. Maybe it's the hospitality and leisure industries. Yet we have these job openings at Electric Boat and in our biopharma communities. And it's an interesting dynamic in Connecticut right now. We have some folks who are having record years and can't find the people to fill the jobs. And obviously we have other areas where we have record unemployment. Any thoughts about how maybe we could utilize our towns, and any thoughts around retraining?
Yeah, I mean, that gets to our workforce development, Chris, but more broadly, what we did during the summer, we had a lot of kids who hadn't been in school for months at that point, is we did put in place in funding for municipalities, so they had a summer outdoor work programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, just to get people back in the game. In the last few months, we've created a program for a lot of the kids coming back, or kids who weren't in school at that point, so they could help us out. They could help us out in vaccination and frontline support we needed there. We had hundreds of college kids, Chris, come back and help out in the classroom. We had a number of teachers that I can Zoom teach, but I can't go in for one reason or another. I did not want that to be a reason the school had to close down. I wanted that to be a reason that a 22-year-old who may develop a love of education can come in and help manage that classroom a little bit. I think those were some of the things that President Biden liked about Miguel Cardona, that he was very entrepreneurial about how we could keep our schools open going forward. So the bottom line is, again, out of our CARES Act money, we've got the capacity to work with our municipalities to come up with programs. They got to be COVID-like related. But for a lot of kids, young people who've been, off the battlefield for a long time, this gives us a chance to keep them busy and something productive. We can pay them a little bit to do it.
Hey, and Governor, let me use this opportunity to give a pitch to Kelly Marie Valeris, who you put into the Office of Workforce Strategy. Again, Kelly worked with me in manufacturing, just like Colin did for many years. I think we're taking over the government, it seems like. But that group has launched the 180 Skills Program. If folks don't know about it, check it out. It's on the governor's website. It's all about retraining some of those folks who've been displaced to maybe get an opportunity to get into manufacturing or other areas where we have the need, Governor, either now or we know we're going to have them soon. So a great job again creating that office and filling that position with Kelly, Governor. Governor,
thank you for giving her a shout out, and it's a testament to how important we think workforce is. And if I could pull back for 1 second on that, Chris, you've mentioned a number of people, Colin, Kelly, David. They came from the private sector. We have a whole different metrics here. We've always, over the last 50 years, Hartford's been a little bit of its own ecosystem. We sort of hired within folks who have been in Hartford for an awful long time. 98% came from the public sector. Look, that's great. And there's an incredibly important role there. But I also like people who know how to manage. And I like people who have managed before. I think Connecticut has done pretty well on related to COVID. And frankly, I got a guy who spent 12 years at IBM, Josh Jabal, who helped oversee that. It was a management issue. It was a production issue. That's what we had to do. And I think that's a group of people that are helping our state to find new ways to deliver services more efficiently at less cost.
And all those folks, Governor, that you mentioned have just, in my mind, been a home run. And it's not private sector is better than public sector. It's that diversity, right? It's bringing in different people with different perspectives. Private sector folks like myself coming into CBIA, working with folks who have been here for a long time. Private sector folks coming into the government, working with folks who have been in the public sector. You need the balance of both, Governor, and I think you've hit a home run on the staff. Paul Mound, Josh Cabal, David Lehman, all the folks we've mentioned. So we really enjoy working with them, Governor, and they're folks who aren't idealists, right? They're pragmatic. They're willing to work towards a solution. And that's where we're seeing this home run of the public-private partnership, whether it's been the reopening committee back in the spring, the vaccine committee now, the folks who have worked on the Transfer Act. More to come, I hope, Governor. More to come. And one of the things that we all can work on, we talked a lot about transportation and infrastructure. You announced the TCI partnership, and there's a question about what Massachusetts is working around the environment and climate change. You mind talking a little bit about that, Governor? It does go to transportation, but it also addresses the environment a little bit.
TCI, the Transportation Climate Initiative, look, it's not going to be very popular. And you're going to have the next round of people on saying there must be another way to do it. That's not very good. But because what it does is it says there'll be a fee for purchasing fuels that create pollutants. And that fee could be up to 5 cents. And then will depend whether the wholesalers pass that along at the gas pump or eat some of that. But let's face it, it's not very popular. But I think it's necessary. I think I wanted to do it with my fellow governors. I don't want to do anything that puts Connecticut at a competitive disadvantage. So I did that with Charlie. I did that with Gina. Gina, before she goes down to Commerce, by the way, Gina Raimondo from Rhode Island. So we have another good friend there. So A, it will slowly move people towards electric vehicles and less pollutants there. B, it generates about 80 or 90 million bucks for us. So that helps our fledgling transportation fund going forward. And we did pretty well on our electric grid. It will be 90% carbon free within the next few years. Our greatest source of pollutants is transportation related, and anything we can do to begin to make a difference there is important. And again, this is a Black and brown community that often live along these transportation corridors. They're the ones who are generally most hit with those comorbidities. And I saw that reflected as I looked at the COVID numbers over the last year. So it's related to public health, it's related to the environment, and hopefully it's related to speeding up transportation and keeping Connecticut more competitive.
Yeah, we're committed to working with your office, Governor, to learn more about it, see how we can fit it in Connecticut to solve a couple things, right? Transportation as well as the climate issues that we've got right now. Governor, looking a little bit beyond this year, I know we're all focused on fiscal year 21 and how we're going to get through it, and we've had some good news with the recent projections, but just looking slightly beyond this year, there's an opportunity that we have with potentially a record number of state employees being eligible for retirement. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the work that BCG is doing. I know we at CBIA have done some studies, and it looks like it could be potentially a $350 to $400 million cost reduction around the state government. But more importantly, it's an opportunity to potentially bring in technology to make the state services more efficient. And we saw that back in, I believe it was April, when the DOL was trying to process a record number of unemployment claims with a 40-year-old, I believe it was a Cobalt sister, Governor, I'm not too sure. You know technology better than I do. And you went in there, and Josh went in there, and you upgraded the system, and you changed that system, and bam, we were processing unemployment claims in a week or two. I mean, that doesn't speak volumes to what technology could do to government services and many services. And with those employees potentially retiring in the next year or two, having the technology to still have those state services be as efficient, if not more efficient than they are today. You mind talking about the state employee retirement and what we're doing to kind of look at that?
Yeah, I've got a plan for that. The legislature back in their last budget said, hire an outside group to help you evaluate that. I think it made really good sense. That's what we're doing. But I knew coming into the government that it's a technological backwater. I think you guys all know that too, don't you? Governors don't like to necessarily invest in technology. It's going to make their successor look really good, but you're not necessarily going to see the benefits of it in the near term. And sometimes labor doesn't like it, so they think it's all about displacing labor. I think it's about getting the very best value for the taxpayer and the customer. And we got to start thinking about each and every one of the people we provide service to as a customer. Yeah, the Department of Labor, all of a sudden, the number of claims are up by 10-fold. And we got this Cobalt system, and we were about to get on that very soon. So we had to jury rig some things. It's not like you get an Apple download and a quick upgrade. These are all, hardwired systems. But that said, again, referring back to Josh and his 12 years at IBM, his predecessors were, mayors and state senators at Department Administrators. I got a guy who was 12 years at IBM. And it's a question of how departments can work more efficiently. You see that at DMV, getting those lines cut way down. It's also a matter of working broadly across these different silos. And technology can bring people together. Right now, during COVID, we had to get everybody together in the emergency operation room and then via Zoom. And then you sort of say, well, why do they all have to get together? And you're just reminded that Department of Public Health and Department of Corrections had to talk all the time because of the nature of the COVID spread in a congregate facility. So those are the type of investments we're making that I think are going to allow us to provide a lot better service and repurpose people who no longer have to do a lot of manual work right now. It's going to take a little bit of time to do it, but we're already showing real progress. We've consolidated personnel, so rather than have every department doing their own personnel, we have a better window on that. We've consolidated or are consolidating technology, so it's not every single department doing their own thing. And we now have an Amazon purchasing platform, and that's across all of state government. And that's helpful in terms of giving us a little bit of economies of scale and lowering the price. But just as importantly, letting us know why they use 5 times more staples in one department than another department. It gives us some insight into what's going on in terms of purchasing. And to be blunt, I'd like to open that up to municipalities. I think we could save them a lot of money. And I'd like to broaden that, working with Charlie and Gina and Andrew Cuomo, see how we as a region can purchase in bulk and get real savings for our taxpayers.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity, Governor, and it's not a layoff opportunity, right? It's employees who are retiring, and we're backfilling them with more efficient technology. Regionalization, as you mentioned, is a huge opportunity. I happen to live in Durham. We have a regional school system. We try to do more with the regional government, and it does lower costs, Governor. Governor, there's a question around taxes, and I know our members are worried about this. I think all Connecticut residents are worried about it, right? We still have the budget deficits in the out years. And some lawmakers have pushed for tax hikes. And I'll tell you, my response to that has been, Connecticut is the poster child for why massive tax hikes have not worked, right? We had massive tax hikes over the last decade, if not 2 decades. And as a result, we had this mess that you came into, right? We still had a budget deficit issue. We had companies leave the state. We had the jobs leave with those companies. We had the people leave with those jobs. And massive tax hikes just don't work in Connecticut. And this is all about reimagining, or as you said in your opening your State of the State, what was it? It was changing the narrative, Governor, right? Changing the narrative and not learning from history, but not repeating it. How about some comments around tax hikes? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think I've been pretty clear. I have no interest in broad-based tax increases. Every governor, Republican or Democrat, since including Lowell Weicker, has done that, and it did not solve the problem. And I came in, and we had a $3.7 billion deficit. The good news is, look, there's a lot of volatility in our revenues, no question about it. How fast we come back, time will tell. We do have deficits in the out years starting at July 1 of over $1 billion. I'll be blunt about it. I also tell you that we have one of the most robust rainy day funds in the country. That gives us a little bit of flexibility. We'll see what, if anything, the federal government's going to do in terms of state and local aid. I don't want to depend upon that, but what it does do is buy us some time to make some of the efficiencies that you and I were just talking about before. So to be blunt, I have no interest in raising taxes, no broad-based tax increases. I think I can do that. I can keep faith with people in terms of the social services, keep faith with people in terms of the not-for-profits. I know the hell that people are going through during this COVID pandemic. I know the fact that a lot of your small businesses are struggling every day just to keep their doors open. And I want to send a signal loud and clear that I hear you.
That's great, Governor. We appreciate you standing up to that. We still have a structural issue in Connecticut that we got to solve. And you're committed, I know, Governor, to keeping your foot on the gas to solving that. Governor, the next question is around some of the concerns that folks had when people were getting sick with COVID and workers' comp liability for the business community. You did a great job, I thought, with that executive order. You limited the time frame. Businesses then had certainty, and that's all businesses ever asked for, Governor, right, is some level of certainty so they can run their businesses. Where do you stand on expanding comp-related, COVID-related workers' comp claims?
Very similar to what we did in the spring, Chris. There was a bill, hey, if you get COVID, it happened in the workplace, and that's going to be reflected in your workers' comp claim. And back then, let's face it, everything was on fire. Positivity rate was really high. Our workers were heroes coming into work. So I understood the fear, and you got to keep people coming to work. But we greatly limited the scope of the claims, made sure that you had already filed the claim during that very limited period of time. Now, here we are 8 months later. If I do anything at all, I think it's going to be very narrow and limited in scope. But right now, I'm doing everything I can to get businesses open. And if you feel like you've got this workers' comp liability hanging over your head, it's a lot tougher to get people to get their businesses open, people back to work. And I'll be blunt. I mean, I think the business community has done pretty damn well in this state. I didn't have to mandate it. I mean, okay, we said plexiglass and not too crowded and things, but your folks understood that if it was a crowded restaurant or a crowded store, if people weren't taking the precautions, if people were in there not wearing a mask, nobody's going to go in there. So most of this has been self-correcting. And I'd like to think that when it comes to employee health and safety, the folks that you're representing there are putting that front and center, because that's the way they know that they can get their workers in the office the next day.
Absolutely, Governor. Governor, we got a couple more minutes here, so I'll throw one more question at you. Our policy pledges around small business relief, and we talked about maybe eliminating the tax on PPE and training to help some of those small business, among other things. It's also around workforce development. But, one of the biggest things in our priorities that has been very well received by businesses and residents in Connecticut is urban renewal, right? Reviving our cities, because as our cities grow and become prosperous, Connecticut will grow and become more prosperous. Any thoughts on priorities you may have for this legislative session around urban renewal? Or we talked a little bit about regionalization, zoning reform. How do we get our cities to come back with the state governor?
Well, you got to be a champion for the cities. You have to be a champion for the cities, even if you're from a small town, because Connecticut will never get the next generation of millennials and growth in a big way unless we bring our cities back to life in a really consistent way going forward. That, being blunt, Chris, that was part of my transportation strategy to make our cities great transportation hubs, focused on transit-oriented development, affordable housing in and around those communities, and making this a place where businesses want to locate. And at the same time, what I've got to do as a governor is keep faith with my mayors. One way we've done that is we've fully funded schools, actually more than fully funded schools. A, so they have great quality education, and B, give them they can hold the line on spending. They can hold the line on property tax rates. We still have extraordinarily high property tax rates in our urban, well, across the state, but in our urban areas in particular. So I think full funding of ECS and more municipal support. Maybe we pay a little more of the pilot programs. That's the payment in lieu of taxes for those places. These are all ways that we can help hold down and reduce property taxes. These are ways that we can make investments in those communities, make sure they have good schools. It doesn't work. If young people don't want to move to our cities, we're not going to be able to make it. And right now, people are taking a second look at Connecticut, and they're taking a second look at our cities. Hartford, Bridgeport, New London, Waterbury, Stamford, oh my God, they're on fire there in terms of people lining up to buy. We got to take advantage of that.
Absolutely, Governor. My analogy has been our cities are like the anchor stores at the mall, right? They attract the folks to the mall, but once they're at the mall, they do their shopping, they keep going, and that's key to us. We've got to get, and that's the landing area, as you said, for the young people, our cities. And they get rooted in the cities, then they move to the suburbs, then they move to the more rural areas, and that could be a home run for us in Connecticut. One last question, Governor. Unemployment trust fund, right? It's insolvent again because of the unemployment, or will become insolvent because of the unemployment claims. That's a burden that usually falls on our businesses. Could be about $1 billion. It was during the last recession. We've been trying to work around some reforms there maybe. Any thoughts that you have for this coming session and how we may handle the unemployment trust?
I am pushing our new chairperson of appropriation, Rosa DeLauro. Rather than, you don't have to fool around with how much you get on unemployment and a lot of those things they're doing right now because they're very popular. And I know this is more complicated, but we've all 50 states have these trust funds are underwater. And rather than turn it into a grant, turn the money we're getting very low interest loans from the feds to pay these extraordinary unemployment claims that are coming in terms of the volume. If you made that a grant, that would save our small business, give us some certainty. We wouldn't have to raise any rates to do that. And I could use your help on that because it's not necessarily something that the politicians really focus on, and they don't get that much benefit, in the campaign trail for saying I turned the unemployment loan into a grant. But I think you guys understand how important that is. And I'll just leave you that's important. But I really want to get people back to work. Chris, you and I were there at your plant talking about the shared work program, for example, which is rather than paying people unemployment because, their restaurant or bar is closed down. I really want to pay employers to keep people employed. And that's what our shared work program does right now. And if you can only afford to keep that person on board 50% of the time, and you've got to choose whether to fire them or not, keep them on board 50% of the time. We have a federal program. I like federal programs that will pay the other 50% for the foreseeable future, just so that we get the vaccines going, we get the positivity rate continues to go down. We continue, we see some light at the end of the tunnel. We see the end zone, whatever analogy you want to have. Then those small businesses are ready to go and they don't have to start from scratch. Those are my priorities: to keep your businesses going, keep those small businesses afloat as the wind slowly gets back to our back again. Hey, Chris, it's great to be with you, John, and everybody here today.
Great, Governor. Thank you for your time this morning. And as Hamilton said, let's not waste our shot, right, Governor? Let's take advantage of this opportunity. Stay well.
Take care, everybody.
As we head to a quick 15-minute break, here's another preview of our discussion on innovation and what it means for the state's economic growth coming up later. And we'll be back at 9:45.
Day one idea was, how do you take a city that has so much potential and create jobs? It was kind of surprising that there was no startups here. We said, we're going to build a beautiful space that could become a center of gravity in Hartford. Space is very important because it's a place where people can meet. It's a place where people can connect. And we pulled in a lot of the corporates. Some of them took space. Some of them started using it for offsites, wonderful conference rooms. And we built additional rooms for them. But it's really in an effort to pull people here. I mean, in its first year, I think we had over 100 events here. I mean, you drive up here, I live in New York, and you're like, Aetna, the Hartford, Travelers. I said, I know 100 companies personally that want to do business with these corporates. I just need to explain to the world that you do it through Hartford. We have networks of investors across the country. Some of the best investors in the country are in our network. We help them get in front of them. We also help them hire. What people don't know is we have more than 175 enterprise partners that are not corporate, that may be hospitals or owners of residential or commercial properties. It could be a realtor, it could be an architect. We have so many. This is how you innovate in real time and react in real time. And this is where a city like Hartford is better positioned than many others. Because doing a deal with one of these big companies is big. I mean, it can make your company. It can make you a unicorn. And that's really, we have the opportunity here in Hartford to create unicorns.
We're all taking things off pause and powering up, but at our own pace. Whatever feels right for you, Webster's here to help you move forward, re-energized, on your time. We're all taking things off pause and powering up, but at our own pace. Whatever feels right for you, Webster's here to help you move forward, re-energized, on your time.
We look to fund and create projects that make it more successful and fruitful for entrepreneurs to start or grow their business here in Stamford. The companies that are just in the germination stage, the companies that are an idea, we need to foster those ideas. Ultimately, what we want them to be is self-sustaining. We want these things to be able to remain and grow on their own long after StamfordNext. There was essentially a 6-month pause in everything that StamfordNext was doing in all of our projects. And what that gave us time to do was to sit back and refocus and actually really try and drill down deeper into the individual needs of entrepreneurs. So it wasn't a lost 6 months, it was actually a growth opportunity for us. Increasingly, what employers want, what students want is to be involved in these fast-growing companies that are expanding and doing interesting things in interesting places like Stanford. We've just signed on for another year of partnership with the University of Connecticut on a data science, AI, machine learning incubator, and that's going to put 5 UConn students in a co-op system with a fast-growing startup here in Stanford to teach them about working in a startup, to help them build the skills that you may need to work in a place like a startup rather than a larger corporate environment, so that they can go out into the world and be in those high-growth companies and take that more impactful path.
Welcome back. A little later this morning, we will release CBIA's 2021 policy priorities, developed with the collaboration of residents and employers from around the state. These common sense ideas are designed to generate the revenue needed to support essential state services while creating a positive climate for growing jobs and driving critical investments in infrastructure in our cities. This year's priorities were formed by the framework of our Rebuilding Connecticut campaign, which is supported by a bipartisan group of 54 state lawmakers and a growing coalition of hundreds of businesses and organizations. 4 of those legislators are here this morning to talk with CBIA's Eric Getty about their perspectives on what we need to do to bring the state back better and stronger than before. Eric, good morning.
Certainly very different than any that I have experienced up at the state capitol. Today we are here and very fortunate to have a bipartisan group of state lawmakers to discuss some of the policy proposals CBIA has put forward in its 2021 agenda and our Rebuild Connecticut pledge, as well as their views on what we will be seeing at the state capitol over the coming weeks. Now, before I introduce our panelists, I just want to remind everyone at home that this is meant to be an interactive session, so please use the chat function located in the middle of your screen to submit any questions. So with that, now I'd like to get on to introducing our speakers. So first, I'd like to introduce Senator Kathy Austin from Connecticut's 9th Senate District, which includes the towns of Columbia, Franklin, Hebron, Lebanon, Ledyard, Lisbon, Marlborough, Montville, Norwich, and Sprague. She currently serves as the chair of the Appropriations Committee and also serves on the Public Safety, General Law, Legislative Management, Regulation Review, Transportation, and Veteran Committees. Also with us is Senator Heather Summers from the 18th Senate District, which include the towns of Griswold, Groton, North Stonington, Plainfield, Preston, Sterling, Stonington, and Voluntown. She's currently serving as the ranking member on both the Public Health and Transportation Committees, and also serves on the Appropriations and Executive and Legislative Nominations Committee. Also with us is Representative Jason Rojas of the 9th House District, which includes the towns of East Hartford and Manchester. And he is the newly elected majority leader of the Connecticut State House. And he's now responsible for all the committees, but he spent a number of sessions as the chairperson of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. And then finally, Representative Tom O'Day of the 125th House District, which includes the towns of New Canaan and Wilton. He is one of the deputy minority leaders serving on the Environment, Transportation, Judiciary, and Legislative Management Committees. Good morning to you all. Now let's start right off with a question on what are your priorities going into the 2021 legislative session. Senator Austin, I'd like to start with you, and then we'll go right in the order that I introduced you. So.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. And I say good morning to all my colleagues and everyone that's on the call today. I have essentially a number of different priorities. One of them is to modernize gaming in the state. That would protect some 12,000 jobs in Eastern Connecticut. It's been a major priority of the Eastern Connecticut delegation. And it is something that I think needs to get done this legislative session. And I'm hopeful that we can get that through the legislature this year. I also put in a number of bills revolving around mental health. And I think that mental health and the crisis that we're going to see once we start opening up from the pandemic is going to overwhelm both state agencies, our schools, and some business environments too, as people decide that they can no longer work in those environments. In addition to that, I put in a number of bills revolving around opening up a pandemic office to make sure that we're prepared for the next event and to put in place structures that would outline what our schools should do, how we can help our small businesses and our nonprofits to be successful. Make sure that we're preparing and providing the supports for the Agricultural Experimental Station, which did a lot of work when we had the avian bird flu in some of the flocks around Connecticut, industry that the agricultural industry is a $4 billion industry in the state of Connecticut. We need to make sure that we're supporting those folks. And quite frankly, we need to do a lot with workforce development. We are going to see a lot of people that need to repurpose their careers because some of the industries are not going to come back at full force for months, if not years. Those are my general legislative priorities this session.
Fantastic. And how about you, Senator Summers? What are your priorities for the 2021 legislative session?
Well, thank you for hosting this today. Thank you to my colleagues for joining me, and thank you to folks who are tuning in. And I look forward to the dialogue with the questions and answers. My priorities this session really focus on the pandemic and COVID. As the ranking member of public health, this is my fifth year on public health. And unless we can get COVID under control, we're going to see our economy continue to suffer. So my first priority is COVID, getting people vaccinated, making sure we have enough vaccine here. I sit on the governor's vaccine task force advisory committee, and we are working diligently to make sure that we can obtain as much vaccine as possible and get it into as many people as possible. That also leads to the other priority, which is to get our children back in our schools. We are going to see children really take a step back just because of the nature of what they've endured and the distance learning, which was not, fully it hadn't really run its course. We didn't have it down to a science when we first started this pandemic. In addition to the healthcare with COVID, what we've seen during the pandemic are clearly voids within our healthcare system that really, truly need to be addressed. Mental health, behavioral health, and telehealth are also priorities of our public health committee as a whole. We will be hearing them as large committee bills so that we can provide opportunities for all in a bipartisan way to come in so we can shape our legislation with the best ideas moving forward. Along with that comes with other priorities. As far as a former business owner here in the state of Connecticut for 20 years, I clearly have always been dedicated and think we need to rethink about the way we demand whether it's professional licensing and the regulations that really put a stranglehold on our small businesses and our individual businesses that are trying to survive here in Connecticut. So I think we need to do a serious look at what we've done in the pandemic through executive orders for businesses that have actually really been positive, and make sure that those are codified in statute. That would go a long way for many of the small businesses that I have spoken to. I also have priorities on workforce development, along with Senator Austin, I believe that that's something that we absolutely need to focus on, and that can be based in healthcare. We've seen a lot of issues with recruitment of physicians, of nurses, and also of CNAs. We are in dire need for that kind of support here in the state of Connecticut. So there's opportunities to focus there, along with other in the workforce development area. And lastly, I think we need to consider serious tax relief for our businesses. Some of the larger businesses have been able to wear through this pandemic fairly well, but our small businesses have been really significantly impacted. We've lost over 1,100 restaurants in the state of Connecticut alone. So we need to think about what we can do as a legislature to ease the burden for our small businesses, because they are our employers. They're going to help grow our economy, et cetera. So those are my top priorities, along with gaming. That's a very big issue in Eastern Connecticut. Senator Austin has taken the lead on that. But she has full support from the Eastern Connecticut delegation. And it's something that's not just good for Eastern Connecticut, it is good for the entire state of Connecticut. So those are a few of my priorities. I look forward to working in a bipartisan manner to try to do what is best for Connecticut to get us back and up and running and get our economy back to where it should be. Thank you.
Mr. Majority Leader, what are your priorities for the 2021 legislative session?
Thanks, Eric, for having me on, and to my colleagues, thanks for joining us, and certainly to all our guests in the business community, thanks for the opportunity to join you today. Similar to Senator Summers, Senator Austin, some of the things that they said, most important, I think, is ensuring that we continue to ramp up testing and getting our vaccination process right so that we can build confidence and rebuild confidence in the residents of Connecticut to try to know that they feel safe to resume some of the normal activities that I think we need them to resume, not only for their health, their personal health and mental well-being, but also for the health of our state's economy and so many of our businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic. Certainly supporting a lot of those businesses. A lot has been talked about the restaurant industry and the impact that's been had on them. I work in higher education outside of politics, and we've been impacted by the pandemic as well. I think you think about our community college system, which is under significant strain, finding ways to support them so that we can get students back into the classroom, so that we can fill that pipeline of jobs that we all know exists and that we know a lot of our employers are struggling to fill. I think we need to look ahead to the eviction and housing crisis. We continue, obviously, to put moratoriums on eviction. It's been done at the state level. President Biden has extended that as well. But we all know well that at some time that issue is going to come due, and we have to be prepared to address it. Not only for the residents who are facing a crisis, but a lot of the property owners as well. They've experienced some difficult situation where they've lost a lot of revenue to what is their small business, and we have to be prepared to address that. I think education, Senator Summers made reference to that. We know that there's going to be a pretty significant learning loss that takes place in a lot of districts, particularly in districts like mine, in East Hartford and Manchester, where we have a higher poverty rate and where inequities that we already knew existed before the pandemic were only exacerbated as we've gone throughout it, and ensuring that the students who have been most impacted by that learning loss are able to be supported adequately so that we can advance their academic potential and their academic careers as we go back to what I hope to be some sense of normalcy in the fall. Obviously, I think the budget is going to be on top of mind for everybody. I think financially, the state is in a pretty strong position as we head into this next biennial budget. I think we should do all we can to do no harm, to avoid any kind of tax increases either on individuals and or the business community so that they can continue to recover and in fact grow and grow our state's economy, which results in increased revenue for the state budget. Personally, I'm interested in a lot of the conversations that's going on around housing and zoning. Those issues very much impact economic development and economic competitiveness as well as being able to recruit people to come here in Connecticut and live, knowing that housing is expensive here in the state, and doing all we can to increase access to opportunity for people who live here, but also to make it more competitive for people to want to move here and live here and not use as much as their income as they have to use to cover their housing costs. And one other issue that perhaps is not viewed as a business issue, but I think it is literacy and how we teach reading in our schools, particularly in kindergarten to third grade. We can improve upon how we teach reading, and I think that's critical to educational success. And of course, that's critical to post-secondary access, as well as having the best employees possible to take on a lot of the jobs that we know exist out there that are largely going unfilled.
Fantastic. And then finally, Representative O'Day, your 2021 legislative priorities.
Thank you very much, Eric. And I want to thank all of you business leaders and small business owners that are on this call. As Eric knows, since I was elected in 2012, I looked at every piece of legislation that come before me and looked at it as though whether it would help grow small business and businesses throughout the state or not. Because the only way we're getting out of this fiscal hole that we're in Connecticut is through small business owners. You're the largest employers. And so I'm going to do everything I can to help you grow. As far as this legislative session, the four of us are all in agreement. It sounds like we could almost hang up and go home. We'll get this economy fixed. But I would say my priorities, in addition to addressing every piece of legislation as how it's going to affect business, is to propping up the unemployment fund. This pandemic was not your fault. And so I don't believe you should have to bear the brunt of the unemployment fund deficit. I also believe we should cut the hotel tax, at least temporarily. We need to grow tourism. I know it's right now we're still addressing the pandemic, but we need to help our hotels and tourism industry. I also think we need to bring a more certainty to the process on how businesses are going to be asked to close down, because we don't want you ordering food or whatever supplies you need, and then 24 hours later, you're told you need to shut down. That's just not right and shouldn't be done. So in addition, getting kids back in school, I heard that's imperative for our business owners, particularly small business owners. So that's a priority of mine and has been. And as Senator Austin and I think Senator Summers said, mental health is a key. This pandemic and the shutdown has caused so much problems for our children and adults in the mental health area. So I agree with my colleagues on that score. So open up to questions. I really want to hear what you all want us to do.
Fantastic. And that's a great reminder to all of the folks watching at home. Please submit your questions using the chat function below. We will get to those very shortly. Now, Representative O'Day, I want to start with you on our next question. Do you get a sense that your fellow House Republican caucus members understand the impact of the pandemic and what it's done to business community?
That's an easy one. Absolutely. I think now you're seeing, and Representative Rojas's comments were spot on. We're in 100% agreement, and our caucus is united, both in the Senate and the House Republicans, on the devastating impact. And the fact that we, unfortunately, I think as a state, picked some winners and losers. A lot of small businesses were shut down, but the big box stores were allowed to stay open. And that was one of the biggest problems I had, because if you want to control crowds, it's easier at a mom and pop store than it is at a big box store. But that being said, I think going forward, the caucus is in unity in helping the business community.
Fantastic. And how about you, Representative Rojas? Are the House Democrats, do they understand, all of them, the full impact that the pandemic has had on the business community?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, we have small business owners within the House Democratic Caucus, right? So they were able to offer a perspective that was probably pretty consistent with what we were hearing from our constituents who are small business owners. The conversation around the impact on the restaurant industry, right? Everybody has restaurants in their district. And, I've been in regular contact with some of the owners in my district. And I know my colleagues in the House Democratic Caucus have been in conversation with business owners of all kind within their districts too. So there's a lot of sensitivity and a lot of interest in trying to figure out exactly how we can best support them.
Senator Summers, how about the Senate Republican Caucus, and Senator Austin, how about the Senate Democratic Caucus? Everyone in full understanding of the impact that it's had? I mean, what are you hearing from your colleagues? We'll start with you, Senator Summers.
Yes, well, I will say that my Senate caucus, most of us are small business owners, so we have experienced it either personally or in a very close manner. I think everybody in the Republican Senate is on the same page as far as the understanding the impact not only to our schools but to our businesses, and the correlation and the connection between the two. And we want to do everything we can to support small business and large business. I think the difference that you will find going forward will be how both caucuses decide how to help them and the method in which we proceed to do that.
Do you want to add anything?
I would just say that the Senate Democrats have all through the pandemic had weekly phone calls, and there wasn't a phone call that we had that did not bring up one set of businesses or another set of businesses as we work through this process. And I do agree with Senator Summers that how we fix this problem for small businesses is going to be the great debate, but everybody is in lockstep with doing something for small businesses.
Perfect. And Senator Austin, we'll stick with you, or we'll start with you on this first or this next question. Excuse me. Now, each one of you, you represent a different caucus up at the legislature. You're all from different parts of the state. Yet every one of you signed on to the CBIA Rebuild Connecticut Pledge this past fall. Now, what was it about that pledge that caused you to lend your support? And again, starting with you, Senator Austin.
Thank you very much for that. And I signed on for two specific reasons that have been major platforms of any legislation that I have put in each year that I've been up there. And that has been workforce development. As a matter of fact, my first session, my first 2 years in the General Assembly, I put a bill in directly reflective of workforce development in order to deal with the problems that Eastern Connecticut was having as we were seeing a decline in the hospitality industry. That is number one for me, is to get that workforce development moving forward as I continue to pressure the Department of Labor to open up their American Job Centers so that we can get people there to repurpose their skills. In addition to that, I would say that infrastructure investment is critical for us to move Connecticut forward. And we need to put some real dollars into fixing our transportation system. That is one of the number one issues that business owners talk to me about, is how are we going to get our transportation system up and running? How can I get my my product from point A to point B faster? How can I get my supplies in faster? All of that would cost me less money, and it would provide me with an ability to be more successful. So those are the two major components of the Rebuild platform that I signed on for.
Fantastic. And certainly transportation, an issue we're going to get back to a little later in this segment. Senator Summers, what was it that that attracted you to the Rebuild Connecticut Pledge enough to lend your support to it?
Well, as a former business owner for many years in the state of Connecticut, workforce development is very important to me, as Senator Austin had mentioned. But one of the primary reasons I wanted to sign on was I liked your mandating change in a bipartisan way. I thought that was very important, and I think we need more bipartisan input into the budget and into bills going forward. Even though we are overwhelmed by one party, we need to have all voices at the table so that we can come up with the best legislation for the people of Connecticut. I also am very keen on the apprenticeship program that you mentioned with tax credits. I know that's something that my business could have used, and I would like to see a more focus with our schools so that when we graduate somebody from high school, they actually have, whether it's a micro certificate, so they have a skill when they're graduating from our high schools, and can work with businesses to create an apprenticeship program in a standard high school, so that when we graduate children from school, if they can't afford to go to college, they have an opportunity to have the skill to go to community college and move on. It's done in other countries. It's very successful. And that's something that I had a bill on last year with Senator Martin and Senator Formica. And I'm hoping that we can continue that. Those are the real reasons why I signed on to your pledge.
We appreciate that. Representative O'Day, why did you sign on to the Rebuild Connecticut Pledge?
3 words, all of it. At the end of the day, we need to grow small business, and that's been my mantra since I got to Hartford. And Eric, as you know, I come to you all the time and say, what do you think? How can we fix it? So any legislation that comes before me that isn't going to grow jobs, I'm going to have a problem with.
Perfect. Well, Representative Rojas, it's going to be really difficult for you to beat all of it as an answer, but what was it that caused you to sign on to the Rebuild Connecticut Pledge?
Yeah, no, listen, upon reading it, I articulated a vision for how we can improve our business climate and grow our state's economy here. And I happen to believe that if it came from CBIA, that it reflects a pretty broad spectrum of businesses here in the state of Connecticut. So that's helpful information for any legislator or any policymaker to be aware of. It was a vision, I think, for moving our state forward that many components of it, were consistent with things that I think are important to moving the state forward.
Great. Now, this question, I'll direct it to any one of you that want to answer it. Something you said, Senator Summers, in your last response about all voices being at the table and how important that is. There's obviously one key voice that's not going to be allowed in the building this year, in the Legislative Office Building or the Capitol, and that, of course, is the public. Now, what steps are you in your caucuses trying to take just to ensure that there continues to be as much transparency as possible in the legislative process? And I'll take whoever wants to start, please.
I'm happy to start with that. The fact that we are in a virtual session is difficult for many, and our caucus did not agree to the rules because we felt very strongly that the people of Connecticut should have an opportunity to come and have their grievances and their voices be heard in person. We have been able to manage voting in that way. We thought that there should be an opportunity for that. Not everyone has access to computers, to Zoom, to broadband. People can still submit written testimony. And we also thought that if we were going to have a virtual session, that we should focus on the bills that really pertain to the budget and COVID related, that we should not be hearing highly emotional and controversial bills that could be set aside until the next year after the pandemic has passed us. So that's where our caucus has stand. Obviously, the rules were adopted. So what we've been trying to do in committees, in our public health committee anyway, is to allow people to do perhaps a 3-minute video on their testimony that they could submit, so we could look at their video. We're trying to make an opportunity for people to call in for testimony during public hearings if they do not have the access to broadband or to a computer. It's very difficult because many people that want to testify, for example, I've experienced that here in my own house, and we supposedly have 5G, although that's, not necessarily working at times when you have a child at home that you're trying to, distance learn, or 3 children on 3 different Zooms at the same time. And you're also working as a business person trying to do your business via the internet. It just doesn't work. Sometimes it's just impossible. So that's where we stand. We're doing everything we can to let our citizens have an opportunity to weigh in. This is a difficult time, and we understand the conditions that we're under in the pandemic. But those were the requests, that we focus on things really pertaining to the budget, the economy, and leave the really highly emotionally charged bills that could wait for another day to set aside.
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. I just want to. Did you want to call on somebody else, Eric?
No, Senator. Go on.
So clearly the rules were adopted, and the rules were worked on in a bipartisan fashion. They were not established by just one party. The lawyers from all 4 caucuses were involved in the rules. I think that this gives us an opportunity this year to test out new technology in getting more people engaged in the process. I often heard that by having testimony at 11, 12 at night or 1 in the morning, as the case may be, that it often shut off people that could not spend all day and all night there. So I think that as we go through this, working in as many platforms as possible, that we will figure out a way to have everybody have their voice heard. I know many people are interested in using the Zoom technology in appropriations. We always have nights when we're there very late, and we're trying to make sure that we're opening it up for many people from the human services environment that come and spend 12 hours to testify on the budget itself. We believe that we can get as many people as possible there. I do like Senator Summers' ideas on the short videos on issues, and I don't think that we should hold back on really discussing the hard topics that need to be discussed. The pandemic itself is a hard topic, but it has impacted in certain areas that really we need to have a real conversation about. Representative Rojas brought up reading. I've worked in a bipartisan fashion on dyslexia. We have one more bill to complete the dyslexia program that we have been folding out over 5 years. I don't think we should put that off. I think it's too important to put off. I think that we need to have discussions on many issues that will be controversial for one group or another group. We need to have those robust discussions. Now, what happens at the end of the day, whether we vote all the way through the process, that's still to be determined. I favor rolling out bills a little bit at a time and start voting on bills in February. I think that we can do that, and I think that there's no reason for us not to do that. So that's what I'm hopeful, is that we'll roll out some of those pieces of legislation that we can, that often wait and get passed on a consensus calendar in the Senate and pass on a 100% bipartisan way in the House, not always on a consent calendar per se, but they have their own methodology of doing that. But I think that this is a way for us to work together. And my commitment is to make sure that we provide all residents of Connecticut an ability to weigh in on issues that are relative to whatever is of concern to them.
Perfect.
Yeah, Eric, I'm happy to contribute too.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt, right? The pandemic has impacted our process. And certainly in many ways it's affected transparency, but I don't know that we're any less transparent than we have been in the past. In fact, we might be. We all know with the public hearing process, your ability to participate in that process is really predicated on, can you take a day from work? Do you have transportation to get to the Capitol? Right. So in many ways, now that we're moving to a technology-based process, it's an opportunity for more people to be involved in a process. And in terms of transparency as legislators, it's up to us to be accountable to ensure that we are transparent. So I have an email address. You can still email me. I have a phone. You can still call me. Many people call me at home. I have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter page, where any of my constituents can ask me a question at any given time about a piece of legislation that we're considering. So I don't know that we're any less transparent. I think it's actually more of a difficult issue for us as legislators. So much of the work that we do happens passing each other in the hallway, grabbing each other in the cafeteria to talk about a particular issue. That lobbyists are obviously impacted in their ability to do their work. And I know people often try to vilify lobbyists, but in my opinion, they're a critical part of the process, and they present a lot of information to us that's useful as we consider the legislation that's before us. But again, they can email us, they can hit us up on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. So it's really about us being more intentional, about being more accountable to the people that we represent, whether they're individuals and or the business community. And I don't know that the pandemic should disrupt the type of issues that we're taking up in any given year. These issues are important. They come up. There are issues that come up every year. I don't know that we need to put them off. We are a very capable group of elected officials, and I think we can manage what is otherwise a difficult process, but one that we will get through. I think about snowstorms. In the past, a snowstorm would basically stop all business for a day if the legislature had committee meetings. I was thinking back to December. There was a snow day. My kids didn't get the day from school off. And I didn't get a day off from work because all my work meetings were on Zoom already, and I kept all those meetings for that day. So in many ways, it might allow us to be more productive. We, of course, need to be intentional about ensuring that we're maintaining transparency, but that responsibility is on all of us to make sure that it happens, and I think we can do that.
Appreciate that. And certainly your description of lobbyists brought a little tear to my eye, so that was fantastic. Representative O'Day, slightly different question for you. We've heard that some of the changes as a result of the pandemic have actually been very positive in terms of being more transparent. Do you see any permanent changes coming to the legislative process as a result of the pandemic?
Look, I don't have much to add to Representative Rojas's comments and everybody's comments. I think there's going to be some good out of this. Like Representative Rojas said, we will be able to have these meetings and people don't have to miss work for participating. So I think I hope that there will be some going forward, some way to have people be able to testify in this kind of a format. I'm looking forward to getting to the last two questions, so I'll stop there.
All right. Well, you're so excited about the next couple of questions. Why don't we get right into it? I want to talk about transportation funding. Part of the Rebuild Connecticut Pledge is the support of a bipartisan transportation funding plan. I think regardless of the caucus you belong to, we all know that transportation funding is important. We all know that we need a solution. What are some of the solutions maybe that you're going to be put forwarding, or maybe even a step back from that? Do you want this to be a bipartisan funding plan? So, Representative O'Day, we'll start with you, and we'll move on from there.
Just real quick, I think accelerating the sales tax into the transportation fund is a good thing. You're going to see, because of that Wayfair decision, that we're going to be capturing more sales tax in the state. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it's a reality. And so I think a way to increase the transportation fund is to push that money or get more of that money. It's going to be extra. It's going to be more than we anticipated, and put that directly in the transportation fund. I do believe we should take out all of the costs that we had put in there for wages and pension obligations that weren't in there initially. And I think through the sales tax and taking out the expenses that were put in there, we can certainly have enough money to spend on transportation.
Fantastic. And I don't want to skip anyone who wants to weigh on this, but certainly I know that Senator Summers, you are the ranking member on transportation. I'll defer to you next if you'd like to join in.
Sure. I would say that I think we need to do a reassessment of what transportation looks like, especially after we've just gone through the pandemic, and talk to the business community to see how they are going to go on in the future for employment. I know many of the businesses that I've spoken to in New York, for example, they are selling their real estate and their people are working from home. So what are the needs for transportation with the way that COVID has transformed our business community, the way we deliver services, and also what are the needs going to be for transportation? I think we need to relook at that. I also agree with some of the costs that have been put into the Special Transportation Fund. They need to be pulled out. I'm not sure that was done way before I was elected, why those are actually in there. That would give us much more clarity as to the monies that are in the Special Transportation Fund and how they are spent. Also, I do agree with Representative O'Day about the sales tax and putting more funding into the Special Transportation Fund in that manner. But I do think that transportation obviously is a priority. We need to come together to figure out the best way to provide the funds that are necessary to upgrade our transportation systems, but we need to know what that's going to look like. Are we going to have as many people commuting as we were previously? I know that many folks that live in Greenwich that were working in New York, they're not even taking transportation any longer, not just because of COVID, but because now they're working at their homes. So I do think that we need to have a reassessment as far as that is concerned before we move forward. I am a little concerned. There is the Secretary-elect of Transportation in Washington announced his idea of a national gas tax that he has floated, even though it is very regressive in its nature. That is something that's concerning if that goes through, plus our gas tax here in the state of Connecticut. What is that going to look like for our middle class citizens that not necessarily have the opportunity to work out of their homes and have to travel the furthest to get to work? So all those things I think need to be considered. And I'm hoping that we can do that in a bipartisan way so that, again, all ideas are on the table.
Fantastic. Would anyone else like to go ahead, Senator?
Thank you. So, I appreciate everybody's comments on this. And many of us on this have been on transportation. I'm on transportation right now. I think that all ideas should be on the table, but I would remind people that should we move more expenses into the general fund and more revenue out of the general fund, it will impact some of the areas that we cannot impact, and that is the social service network that we have. Our nonprofits are essentially small businesses. They hire many people, and to expect them to go years and years without properly funding them is unacceptable. And if we move more money out of the general fund into the special transportation fund, and we move more expenses in, the ultimate goal that what will happen is we will see a decrease in services in areas where we moved former state jobs into the private nonprofit sector that essentially dropped our costs down on the general fund side of things. In regards to transportation itself, it is true that the upper echelons of our economies are now working from home, but that is not true for what we call essential workers, those that work in nursing homes or group homes. They took public transportation every day to go to that nursing home where our moms and dads are, that group home where we take care of the most fragile residents in the state of Connecticut. Those people took public transportation every day. Now, they were not on trains; they were on buses, and those that took that public transportation did not see a decrease in ridership to the extent that trains saw a decrease in ridership. And we actually provide more subsidies for trains than we do for buses in our special transportation system. So I think that there is a lot to look at. I agree. But I'm hoping that people step back from the partisanship and say that we're going to move more expenses into the general fund, which happened well before, I think, any of our times, and take that revenue out, because those small businesses, those nonprofits, which employ thousands and thousands of our residents and take care of thousands and thousands of our residents, will be the ones that are impacted.
Perfect. Representative Rojas, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. The one thing I will say there are likely no popular solutions to addressing the transportation issue, but then again, we're not elected to only act on popular things. We're elected to make hard decisions, whether they're popular or not. And the reality is, the gas tax at the federal level hasn't been raised since 1993. Inflation has gone up 77% since then. The state gas tax, I don't think, has been raised since the late 1990s. In fact, in the late 1990s, it was politically popular, I'm sure. We reduced the gas tax, right? And that has all ramifications for the decisions that we have to make today. And largely, we've been handed a system, all of us, I think, all of my colleagues here on this panel, we've been handed a system that most of us had no business in designing. So we've been set up in this way. When personnel costs were moved into the STF 30, 40 years ago, that in hindsight, which is 2020, probably not the best decision to do that if we really want to dedicate these limited resources to actual infrastructure improvements. But the other side of that is you do have to pay for personnel to get these projects done, whether it's the engineers who are designing our projects or the folks on our highways who are building them. Those are costs that have to be factored into transportation, and we have to fund them. So we know we have limited options to do that. Tolls seems to be off the table. The House chair of the Transportation Committee has indicated they're not even going to have a hearing on that. So that's off the table. Increasing the gas tax is popular with no one. So that we'll have to see how a conversation around that goes. We do know that the governor recently signed an MOU on the Transportation Climate Initiative. I think we all need to learn a bit more about that, but that likely will have the effect of increasing gas taxes. And we'll have to see exactly how that revenue that's generated from that comes back to Connecticut to invest in our infrastructure. But we all know, I think those of us on the panel and those who are participating from CBIA now know it's one of the most critical issues that we're dealing with as a state. So does it require a bipartisan solution? I think it does. I think The best policy is often bipartisan policy, and I think we can get there. Beyond looking at funding sources, I think we also need to look at governance and how we do this. Right now, I think the state DOT has too much on their plate, and I think we have an opportunity here to devolve some of the decision-making and responsibility down to our councils of governments and our metropolitan planning organizations, which are these entities that most people have no idea exist, and their governing bodies are made up of our locally elected officials. And I think we need to empower them and give them additional resources to make a lot more decisions that should be made at the local level about what the speed limit is on a particular road or a local bridge that needs to be fixed. Let the folks closest to those projects make those decisions and free up a capacity at the state level for DOT to focus on airports, to focus on rail, and to focus on our highway systems.
Fantastic. So we're running very short on time. So I would ask, I want to start getting into the audience questions. And I would just ask that going forward, we all keep our answers as brief as possible, just so everyone can weigh in when they want to. One of the questions that have been submitted, and I guess it's one of the questions that is submitted no matter what the topic is or what the public hearing is, but what is the outlook on recreational marijuana in the coming legislative session? And I'm going to add a little bit to that, and if you are a supporter of that, or if you're not, and they decide to pass, would you still be supportive of businesses being able to continue to test employees in order to ensure the safety of the workers on the job site? So whoever wants to jump in on that, by all means.
So I'll jump in first just to start the discussion. First, on the business community, there are jobs right now that have federal consequences, and us approving recreational marijuana, should we do that or not, need to understand that jobs that people that work at Electric Boat or any of our manufacturers that are interfacing with the federal government, or any job that requires a CDL, have to have the ability to test their employees. I'm hoping that if people are looking at supporting recreational marijuana, they'll also consider supporting things like the drug resource enforcement officers, the DREs, that have been unfunded for a number of years, that allow those state troopers and municipal officers to test people on the road for drugs relative to marijuana. It's something that can be done. It does cost money, but we should be doing things like that to make sure that that this is a rounded program that is not just looking at allowing people to have recreational marijuana without any of the consequences of driving while intoxicated.
If I can add,
Please.
from a public health perspective, there are 3 issues. Number 1, there's no test that can test you for acute intoxication with marijuana. That is a big problem. There's also no ability at this point in time to know what the dosage is that you're getting within, whether it's a gummy bear or a lollipop. There's no measurement of dosage. That's also an issue. So you don't really know how much of the intoxicant you're getting in the product that you are purchasing. As Senator Austin has mentioned, I represent Groton with Electric Boat. The former president had made it very clear that if Connecticut legalizes marijuana, it could put them at jeopardy for government contracts, because they have to certify that their workforce is able and ready to finish the contracts in the submarines. And I'm sure that's the same for Sikorsky, et cetera. And when you're competing against Virginia, where marijuana is not legalized, that could be a consideration in government contracts, which is concerning because they are one of the largest employers, and that also goes according to CDL licenses also. The other thing is there are significant public health impacts. We are now a state that is banning smoking under 21. We are looking at banning flavors for vaping. And then we turned around and said, but it's okay to smoke marijuana. The Public Health Committee would have a difficult time saying that smoking anything is okay. And one of the things that we want to ensure is that if this legislation is pushed forward, that it comes in front of the Public Health Committee, which we think is absolutely necessary. The last few times this bill has been in, it has skirted public health, which we think is a mistake. But if this legislation is to go forward, I would like to see the revenue that is generated to be dedicated towards opiate addiction and all the other things that we're fighting here in the state of Connecticut. And that being said, I think that we should look at other states where marijuana has been recreationalized and it is legal, and look at the revenue generated, but also the cost associated with the legalization of marijuana. And I think you would find a very different picture if you looked at it in a more holistic approach.
Perfect.
Yeah, Eric, I'm happy to comment as well.
If you could do it very short for both representatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
15, 20 seconds or less if possible. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. We of course need to be sensitive to workforce issues. The reality is that it's illegal in 11 states in the District of Columbia, and it's legal for medical purposes in 34 states, including Connecticut, right? So I'm pretty sure we can figure it out based on the experience that we're seeing around the country. And the reality is, if it's legal in Massachusetts, it's going to be legal in New York and legal in New Jersey. Folks are consuming it already, and they're driving to those states. So, there are legitimate questions around public health and enforcement and all those things. Right now, you can get a driving while impaired if an officer determines that you've consumed cannabis. So there are ways around that. We need to improve all of them, but we're long overdue for addressing this issue.
I would just add that in due respect to my good friend Representative Rojas, I'm a heck no.
All right. Well, that is a perfect way to end this segment. First of all, I want to thank all of you for the time you spent. I know you were incredibly busy at this time of year. There's committee meetings going on every single day up at the state legislature. And we really appreciate the time that you've given to the CBIA business community this morning. So thank you, Senator Austin, Senator Summers, Representative O'Day, and Representative Rojas. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just reinforce my thank you to Senator Austin, Senator Summers, Representative Rojas, and Representative O'Day for sharing your thoughts on this year's legislative session and your policy priorities. And we really, really appreciate your support for CBIA's Rebuilding Connecticut Pledge. Each of you were among the very first state legislators to sign the pledge and commit to supporting its critically important policy recommendations. And those recommendations are built around 5 crucial areas: workforce development, urban renewal, infrastructure investment, small business relief, and taxpayer return on investment. These policies will help Connecticut employers, particularly struggling small businesses, manage the high costs of navigating COVID-19 restrictions, create and retain jobs, and lead the state's economic recovery and growth for the benefit of all our Connecticut residents. And let's not lose sight of what's important. We must continue the fiscal discipline of recent years that has seen revenue growth and a rainy day fund that is now at historic highs. That means nurturing a growing tax base, not imposing more tax hikes, and reducing costs so we can make the necessary investments in the state's future. And by the way, your company can make an impact immediately on a key area for rebuilding the state's economy. That's workforce development. Our affiliate ReadyCT is running its annual internship program again this summer, and it's looking for host companies. It's an outstanding program that a number of companies have supported in recent years, including Travelers, RSL Fiber Systems, New England BioSA, and Pratt & Whitney. You can learn more about the virtual breakfast at readyct.org. We have great affiliates at CBIA between Concept and ReadyCT, and we really try hard to be the trusted solution provider for our business community. Now, as you heard earlier from the governor, and just now from our legislator panelists, the better than expected state revenue forecasts that were announced last week certainly broaden the options for addressing the state's budget deficit. It's vital that the business community speak as one voice and remind lawmakers loudly and often that the focus must be on legislation that promotes a climate for creating jobs. You can learn more about the Rebuilding Connecticut campaign at CBIA.com. And if your company hasn't joined the Rebuilding Connecticut Coalition, take a moment to sign up and join the hundreds of businesses across the state that have pledged their commitment to the campaign. Innovation is essential to rebuilding the effort and to reimagining the state. And so what does innovation look like? Well, we're joined this morning by the leaders of District New Haven, StamfordNext, and Upward Hartford, and the Executive Director of Hartford-based Reset, Sarah Bodley. Innovation is so critical to growing Connecticut, and as I said with the governor, urban renewal is the foundation of growing Connecticut. It's critical that we have vibrant cities, innovative workforce, collaborating together to grow our economy, to reimagine what Connecticut looks like, and to rebuild stronger and better than we have before. As we're waiting for our panelists to come on, let me remind you to join CBIA.com and sign the policy pledge. It's critical that we have a loud voice at the state capitol. Legislators don't always want to hear from lobbyists and advocates. They want to hear from you, the business leaders, and the residents of Connecticut. What's important? It's critical that they hear from the voices of Connecticut as to why we need to grow our economy, nurture our business community, and create jobs. So as we wait for the legislative panel to join us, think about what's important to you and let us know at CBIA. Email us, write us, call us, and let us know how we can help you rebuild your businesses and grow the economy where you are and in the communities across the state of Connecticut. In addition, if you get a chance, make sure you reach out to us if you want to hear your voice heard, and we'll connect you with legislators and media so that your voice can be heard loud and clear. Now let me turn it to our innovation panel, which I believe Sarah Bodley will be navigating us through. Right, Sarah, great to see you. I hope you're having a great new year and business is off to a great start.
Thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, it's great to be here. I think on the right foot with this excellent panel and this morning's event. So thank you for having me, and for also the panel that just finished. The representatives shared some really incredible insights. Really a pleasure to be here. And I also want to thank CBIA for putting together such a great summit this year. I'm honored to be here. As Chris noted, I'm here representing Reset Social Enterprise Trust in Hartford, which has been a staple in the community since 2007, focused on advancing social enterprise and impact-driven companies through our Impact Accelerator and other activities, really trying to make space to spark innovations to address climate change and social and economic inequities. And obviously in the last year, we've seen a real incredible shift as we've all navigated COVID-19. This morning, Governor Lamont pointed out that businesses really want to give back and help their communities through this. So I personally see that as a huge form of innovation. And I'm excited to dive into this topic of innovation through a business lens with our esteemed panelists this morning. I'm joined here by three very entrepreneurial individuals who are doing really amazing work in the innovation entrepreneurship spaces. Wes Bemus, the Executive Director of StamfordNext. JoHannah Hamilton is the COO at District New Haven. And Shana Schlossberg is the founder and CEO of Upward Hartford. Thank you all so much for being here today. I know our audience has already been introduced to you throughout the morning with some short video clips. And so if you haven't had a chance to see those, audience, I'm sure you'll be able to revisit them later, but we're going to dive right in. And I'd like to kick things off by asking each of our panelists to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your why. At what point did you realize a need for your organization, and what gaps did you recognize in the community that you wanted to attempt to close? Wes, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. My name is Wesley Bemus. I'm the Executive Director of StamfordNext. StamfordNext is one of 4 cities here in Connecticut that has received an Innovation Places grant from the legislature. The idea behind the Innovation Places grant, and the reason for our being, is that after GE kind of left a few years ago, we all recognized that we needed to create our next GE here at home. And the concept is to create ecosystems and networks and support systems for innovators, entrepreneurs, and really new businesses in each of our cities. So I'm our representative at Stamford. We also have representatives in Hartford, New London, and New Haven. And I'm thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Wesley. Shana, let's go to you next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. So my name is Shana Schlossberg, and a few years ago, I arrived in Hartford, actually 4 to be exact. And I was, I saw a city that was in distress, and I but mostly I saw all the logos as I drove up. And I said to myself, we need to create a center downtown, intersection, if you will, where people can connect. The corporate community can bring entrepreneurs, can help entrepreneurs, and can work with them. And that's what we set off to build with Upward Hartford. We took 27,000 square feet, then an additional to up to 34,000, and we just created an incredible intersection that many of you have probably visited and know about, with hundreds of events in the last few years, and more than, I would say, 30 corporate partners and over 150 enterprise partners. Entrepreneurs that have visited our space have been already in the hundreds, and many have built their companies from our space. So that's us.
Wonderful. Thanks, Shana. And JoHannah.
Hi, I'm JoHannah. I'm the COO at District New Haven. And I came to District in 2017 after completing my MBA dissertation as business plan for District Cowork. We opened Cowork in April 2018, soon reached almost 100% capacity, started to grow and build out the space. And I started to really see the impact that the community and the ecosystem had in these 100,000 square feet, and saw that really come to life. I saw the kinds of connections that people were making here and growing their own companies, starting new companies with people that they met here. And I knew that we needed to curate more places like this. We built a building, but together we've blended the academic approach with me, with intuition and human design with our co-founder Dave, to create something that we don't really have a name for. District is not an accelerator or an incubator, but it is a connected community of people and businesses that are innovating every day.
That's great. Thanks, JoHannah. And we're going to hear a lot more about that later on today as well. I do want to start off a little bit talking about innovation. That's the topic of the day, but I think it's a shifting landscape that we're in right now. And we've seen a lot of amazing innovation in the last year, kind of as a result of COVID. I'd love to hear your perspectives on how we can make the most of that tidal wave of innovation during the pandemic so that it remains part of our culture as we recover. And if you have some examples of things that you've seen in the past year, we'd love to hear them as well. Why don't we start with Wes again?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been interesting because I've been working with entrepreneurs in the community all the way through the pandemic, and really what they've seen it as is an opportunity to come up with new ideas and iterate and pivot their businesses for the new reality that we're living in. A few direct examples where I work with and we support an organization that provides mentorship and guidance and opportunities to startups founded by immigrants. And there was one of the participants in that program. His name is Chef Rene. He was a catering chef here in Stamford before the pandemic. Obviously, that business had to let him go. Instead of trying to figure out another catering business that he could work for, he said, "I'm going to start my own online coursework teaching cooking to people because I feel that I can do this well in an online setting." So this gentleman has started a business. He's receiving mentorship from a prominent venture capitalist here in Stamford. He's receiving resources and guidance from his community center that we're funding. And so it's been very interesting to see people take their ideas, say, we're in a new digital world, we're going to iterate, we're going to pivot, and we're going to execute on this. And people are innovators and entrepreneurs in Stamford are doing that. Another example, we have a startup here in Captain, Shannon Daniels, who is, I believe, a mentor at the district there, JoHannah. And she had an event production software company that she successfully has pivoted into purely online virtual event hosting and management, and it's going very well for her. So they've seen the need, they've reacted to the times, and I'm excited by the fact that innovators are innovating.
Thanks. Shana, anything to add from your perspective?
Yes. So 2 years ago, I did a fund called Upward Labs, focused on real estate technology, energy, and specifically aging technology. And against all odds, we actually started our third cohort on September 1st, so mid-pandemic, but really focused on technologies for COVID. And we've had 10 entrepreneurs on the ground in Hartford through, since September. And what we've seen actually is quite remarkable. You know, Upward's whole methodology is to bring great entrepreneurs from around the world that need to be in Connecticut and across the country and help them grow their businesses because they want to work with the incredible corporate community we have, either on health or on real estate or on energy. And one of the things we've seen is, you know, not only have we learned to adapt by, you know, Wes's examples of doing everything online and everything, because entrepreneurs can always do that, but we're seeing that also in the corporate community. For the first time, we're having commercializations happen within months when it took some, you know, usually a year and a half. So people have become, in a way, a lot of fat has been trimmed. We know this from businesses, also in corporates. People have become, I found, more accurate in the last few months. So if you bring them what they need, or if they meet what they need, then real commercializations can happen, real success can take place. And we've seen that a lot with the companies. And you know, are the companies that are coming because they're COVID solutions, the ones that are in that space and have used the environment not to their advantage, but they're really offering a solution. It could be social isolation in the nursing homes, which is a huge problem right now. It could be quality and air quality and energy efficiency in buildings, which buildings all over the world now need for the first time. So these companies that are now being built from Connecticut are, you know, have gone from zero to millions in revenue in some cases in months. So it's been a great time for very specific technologies around COVID solutions.
Yeah, I think that as we've seen over the past few months, it's really that innovation is saving people from the pandemic. Zoom existed before the pandemic, we knew that, but being able to stay connected and now having people see that innovation is important as it has always been present. One company here has operated nonstop through the pandemic because of Zoom and has been able to use 3D visualization of organs and body systems and evaluate medical needs for patients in India. So I think that the pandemic forced innovation as necessity that otherwise would have taken much longer for companies to move forward in some ways.
I appreciate that. And I'm curious because obviously as we come through this, hopefully those needs are going to shift. But do you have any thoughts on, you know, you've all also created environments that allows innovation to thrive. Do you have any tips for our small business community and our entrepreneurial community on how to build that culture of innovation as we go forward and how to really, you know, keep leveraging that?
I mean, I want to say, don't get me started. It was my dissertation. I think my advice would be to find spaces like District Co-work, like StamfordNext, like Upward Hartford, where you can be around other people, safely, socially distanced, all cleaning protocols adhered to, that will allow you to benefit from the thoughts of other people. You know, one of the values that we have here at District is that we respect the journey and we believe in people. And that means that it's important that we're not the smartest person in the room. Like, we're not going to learn anything that way. And I think we've really seen the benefit of that here, even from companies just formed over the past few months, companies that have, you know, finished out their rounds of seed funding during the pandemic. All of them have, you know, been here day in, day out, just plugging along. I think the energy and the culture of being around other people who are, you know, getting by just like you, can really have a magnifying effect.
I'd just like to, you know, the other side of that coin is that being around people can be dangerous right now, and so how when you're starting a business which is naturally already potentially lonely, stressful, almost even scary, how do you get those kinds of collisions, those kinds of interactions? It's difficult, and really, as a startup founder, part of your goal is to network and meet as many people as possible because it's going to help you iterate. It's going to help you develop your concept. At the same time, we're all trying to keep people away from each other right now. And the best thing that I can say for an innovator is find your community, find your group of people, and just talk. And even if it's like this, you know, we have weekly entrepreneur in residence Zoom calls that we run through the library downtown here. And we have a few mentors that come on, and we have 5 to 10 founders, and they all come on and they just talk to each other. And the whole point is more that they're in a community together without being together. And really, if you can't have a physical space, still get together with other people, because you're going to feel like you're not alone. You're going to feel like you have success, and other startup successes are going to help you think about and iterate and develop your own success.
So if I can jump in, actually, I want to answer from a different direction. You know, the innovation ecosystems, JoHannah was saying, this pandemic taught us, bigger than Connecticut, bigger than the three of us, that innovation is the only way forward. I was talking about real estate technology. I was talking about nursing homes. Our food supply is in danger. Our energy supplies are in danger. I mean, we learned every bad lesson. COVID is an accelerant. That means it broke everything that wasn't really working. And so now we know that the future is tomorrow doesn't look like yesterday. That means tomorrow is all about innovation. It's not how do we retain innovation. We have to throw everything else away, because we have to create a better place on every front. And we know this on a grand scale. And the challenge is like Wes and John are saying, is innovation ecosystems are in trouble because the old models have been threatened, right? Many of us have built models around co-working or different ways, or in Upward's case, we do a lot of corporate event rentals. So the old models on that front are broken. They can't operate in a 2020/half of 2021. But more than that, even accelerators around the world, more than 50% of the accelerators are now closed because corporate funding, I don't want to say dried up, but everything was shut down. Corporates go into freezes. Everything was stopped. And, you know, and if they had other sustainable models, those have been hurt. So we're in such a dilemma now that I want to look at from a Connecticut perspective, but even from an American perspective, that we know we have to not only keep the innovation we had, but double and triple and more, or we won't survive into the next 10 years. But on the other hand, what do we do in order to maintain an innovation ecosystem, strengthen them? Because they're the place where an innovator succeeds. What we're saying is absolutely correct. Where we're seeing innovations, if you're in a bubble where you don't have spaces or you don't have places to connect or people to meet, your chance of success is much, much lower than others. And we all operate some form of training or accelerators. So, and that's, you know, we're on a call where this is meant for policy. That's something that should be a huge wake-up call to government and to our governor especially, to say, this is the time to take organizations like ours and say, what do we need in order to get into 2021 correctly? It's not how do we help another entrepreneurs? How do we change the game? We need better and bigger ideas. We can't take what was and just say, join a call online. It's not enough anymore. I think that everything has to be looked at in a new way.
Well, and digging into that, if I may, because I think, you know, we wanted to talk about the ecosystem and how it will look different in the future coming out of this. So we're also all in different cities here. We've got Hartford, Stamford, and New Haven represented. I'd love to hear your take on, you know, what are some of the specific conditions needed in your region, and perhaps, you know, thoughts on how they are similar or different from each other. And I would even add, is there a statewide approach? I think there is, but I'd love to hear your take on sort of how you think your local ecosystem, you know, fits into the bigger picture and how you work across those lines.
Yeah.
Wes, do you want to start us off? Thanks.
Yeah, in the case of Stamford, we're actually fairly competitively placed. Connecticut has done an excellent job of keeping us close to and connected with New York City. And what we found when the pandemic landed was that innovators, startups in New York City started looking at the failures that we just discussed of the traditional network models and saying, why are we spending all of this money to be here in New York when we can't meet the other innovators that we want to meet? Why are we in this place where we may ride an elevator up 50 floors and be exposed to COVID the whole time? Here in Stamford, they've been coming out of the city in droves. We've been seeing an explosion of young people and professionals and companies moving out of the city here to Stamford. And really, the future is, and not to proselytize, but the direction is we need to make our cities, particularly cities like Stamford, New Haven, and Hartford, extremely attractive to retain those people. They're here. They're understanding that the quality of life in Connecticut is just so much higher. They're understanding that the financials relative to Connecticut or even Boston are favorable for a startup when you're thinking about being lean, when you're thinking about every penny, when you're looking at your burn rate. And so how do we make it so that we have these cities now? Let's create and continue to create cool, interesting urban spaces that are going to make the cool, interesting, thoughtful people who are starting these companies want to remain here now that they are here. That's us. I'm not qualified to talk about New Haven or Hartford, so maybe.
No, and I'd love to hear JoHannah and Shana, your perspectives on your, if whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of challenges, but there are so many things that are going well and that we're doing right. And I think if we can bring awareness to what those things are and break down the barriers to access some of the things that we are doing well, that's where we're going to succeed. So one example I'm thinking of specifically is our nonprofit. So District Arts and Education didn't start out as primarily a focus on fixing education. It's not about that. It's about workforce training and learning and double-sided mission. The founding party believes that talent is the most important thing as it relates to starting a company and attracting, recruiting, and retaining talent. And two, to break down barriers to access these jobs. And what we do when we partner with the Whole Burton School and other entities here is really focus on the fact that Connecticut has 7,500 open computing jobs. If you have used your phone during the pandemic, you can thank a software engineer. We know that these things are going to continue to be needed. And we also know that there is capable and ready talent within our state that has been underserved in K-12 by not being introduced to computer science, that has been underserved as adults, 18 through 60, particularly minorities and women, and are ultimately ill-equipped to respond to the state's need for tech talent. I mean, how many companies have come in through accelerators or incubators and stay? Like, we're not holding people in. Why? When we've got the best workforce in America here, why aren't we activating them? Why aren't we using the talent that we have and eliminating the barriers for them to access these meaningful jobs? Our graduates are starting salaries at $72,000. There's meaningful change there that is truly innovative.
Shana, anything to add?
Yes, I mean, I think that, really good points have been raised. And I know that Connecticut is now feeling a little bit of a surge because people have left New York or Boston. But realistically, it's probably going to be temporary for most. And they're going to end up going back unless, like Wes says, we find a way to keep them. And I think we're facing in the next 6 months a unique opportunity that unfortunately government has never been fast to react to these, sensitive 6-month opportunities. But if we don't do it, in 6 months, we'll be back to, we're not attractive. They're back in the city because there are things that are missing. And JoHannah was talking about talent. Talent is a huge issue. Some of the things we've done at Upward is when we do bring a startup, we try to help them hire. But we're looking at we're one state, we're small on the grand scale. Are we doing enough? There's states that are doing incredible programs. I've had a conversation now. Upward has invested in 28 startups to date, the Upward Labs, and I've been having conversations with these companies around the country and around the world saying, how do we get you to take jobs in Connecticut? And, if you handed them a perfect candidate for each one, they probably hire, but we don't have infrastructure to help do that. And we don't have, Upward has been doing a lot of work with internships in the universities, but even that needs a lot more work. You have countries that are, if you hire interns and you hire graduates, they're paying for part of it. There's so much better infrastructure around the world than we've ever had in our state on how to say, we're not going to let you go. We're going to white glove it for you. You're here. We see your potential of building 30, 40 jobs. We're going to help you make that happen. We're going to help you hire because and in Upward's case, these are companies that already have landed commercialization deals with one of the mega corporates in the Hartford area. And I want to see us, and we are trying, we're doing everything we can, but we need more help how to be able to do that better. And this really is a statewide effort. I think that one of the things we saw in COVID that was really kind of fantastic is how much people work together. And you saw, regional work, right? You saw the governors coming together because they realized that if we fix COVID in Connecticut, but New York doesn't, we're in trouble. How do we do the same thing around economic development? Economic development, like COVID, is bigger than all of us. It's bigger than one state. And we see the startups we work with around the world don't look at Connecticut. They say, we need something in the Northeast. We want to do research in the Northeast. We want to set up sales, marketing. And I think if the Northeast would work together better, not only the cities in the state, but we'd have more of a regional approach to how we bring the startups that need to be in Connecticut to be in Connecticut while letting the ones that need to go to Boston go to Boston. It would be more sustainable. It would be more of a joint effort. While currently states are just cannibalizing each other's works. We're all fighting over the same ones. One is offering giving a better offer, maybe more money to a startup. They're ending up going there. So I think COVID taught us a lot on how potentially we could look at things we've done yesterday and do it better and do it more collaboratively.
On the talent front, and the things are starting to move on that front. So in the past 12 months, I actually, here at StamfordNext, we funded and piloted for the governor what's being referred to as the Governor's Innovation Fellowship here. We went around to all of the major companies, startup and larger scale here in Stamford. We said, create jobs, and we're going to go to the universities here in Connecticut. We're going to convince those students that the top students from those schools should stay and join and work in those jobs. And over the course of 6 months, we went out, we had 30 jobs that were created. COVID took a couple of them away. We recruited a few hundred students from the top percent of all of their classes. We then matched them up with these jobs here in Connecticut. We paid them a stipend, a $5,000 grant to help them with their moving or with their first month's rent and those sorts of expenses. And they're in those jobs. And over the course of this 12 months that we're in now, they're going through programming. They're doing professional development. They're learning how to communicate better in the workplace. They're learning advanced computing skills. And this is, to your point, the white glove type service that we need to do. 42% of Connecticut's graduates from our universities, and the better universities, that number's higher, leave the state. And our greatest export is intelligent people. Well, we have those 7,500 computing jobs open. So how do we, to your idea of that white glove approach, that's real. And other states around us, Rhode Island has the Wavemaker Fellowship. I know that Indiana has an incredible fellowship, the OR Fellowship, which actually the Governor's Innovation Fellowship is based on. But after this successful pilot this year, CTNext, the state's small business support network, has decided to take the Governor's Innovation Fellowship and expand it statewide. So you're going to see it popping up in cities near you. And the whole idea is, we're going to create that two-sided marketplace so that companies and talent can find each other and they feel like they're in an impactful role here in the country.
Yeah, and it's a great first step, and we've been doing that as well, but it's much more than only talent, it's investors. And that, Upward has been doing it to the startups we invest in. We match them. This week alone, our 10 companies have each met 25 funds from around the globe, from around the country, because there aren't enough funds in Connecticut. So we're trying to get the money so if they have money, they stay. But everything we're doing is still too small. We're a state that needs, everything has to come together, and wider and bigger solutions have to be implemented. But this is definitely great starts, right? Testing the waters on what works and seeing how to replicate that.
I want to just cut in for a moment to remind the audience too, we will transition to audience questions in just a few minutes. So if you have any burning questions, please put them into the chat box, and we will make sure that we get to those before we sign off today. I would love to just dig in a little bit more, because I think we've heard some really important themes. Obviously, access to talent, the workforce development piece of our pledge is coming through loud and clear. The need for community, the need for funding. I would love to kind of take an equity lens, because I think we've heard that come through. JoHannah, certainly in talking about the Halberton School and District's nonprofit work. I think each of you have ways that you're thinking about equity and inclusion as part of the important factor here. And I'd love to hear more about, how you're approaching this economic recovery with an inclusive lens.
I think we've started on a good path. There are so many more things that we can be doing. Just as background context, like the Halberton School is a 2-year program. There's no prerequisite to attending. You could be 17 or 70. You don't have to have any background in computer or software engineering. You pass the test, you get in. It is tuition free until graduation, and then you pay back your tuition over a period of 36 months after graduation, which breaks down the barrier of initially needing money for tuition for the school. The barrier that's still in place is you still have to live and support yourself while you're in school, which is really difficult to do when you're in a program as intensive as that. One way that a foundation, the Kaiser Family Foundation in Tulsa, with their Holberton School Program partnership, they launched life stipends. So $1,500 a month to students who are earning less than $60,000 a year. Like, what a great way to partner with other like-minded organizations that breaks down another barrier and gives people better access to entry. I think we have access to data about what works. If we can get people behind it, we can 10x the results that we've gotten in just the first 2 years. I think one of our problems is that, you know, we call in consultants and we want them to give us answers about, you know, what we should do, and what they tell us is what has happened, and it's their job to study differences, not similarities. You know, to Shana's point, it's like there's a lot here that is similar between our states here in the Northeast. And if, you know, we don't pit ourselves against each other, but instead work to develop a greater supply for the demand that we all have, you know, I think that's where, you know, we start to 10x innovation. But we can't really expect to get that when we're not teaching it, when we're not acting in that way, if that makes sense.
Wes or Shana, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and maybe in brief so that we can get to some audience questions as well.
Absolutely. Just very briefly, you know, your point on being equitable and inclusive is important, because I think that not only is our recovery potentially going to be lopsided if we aren't asking these questions, but we've been lopsided in this state for a little while. You know, networks in the state are tight and insular. And if you're in a network, you're in it. If you're not, you're not. And so one of the goals that we put forward this fall, and we actually issued an RFP specifically for this, is we're looking to fund and find projects that specifically create resources in community for those underserved or those less targeted demographic groups, where they can have the same ideas as any other demographic group. And this is why I mentioned Chef Renee earlier. You know, the Immigrant Entrepreneurship Incubator that we're funding through the Stanford Building 1 Community Center, that's just hopefully the first drop in a larger bucket, right? It's funding 8 to 10 companies to go through that incubator process. I'd like to see that be 50. I'd like to engage the donor community. I'd like to engage the business community to find a way that we can scale that up so that, you know, we're pumping through companies through this incubator, because those ideas are there. And if you give people the opportunity to start their own business, and you give them the resources and the confidence and the safety net almost, right, with that they'll take that and they'll run with it. And so that's one thing that I'm particularly excited about. And I think that it's something that we can do, because there's so much room for improvement that we need to take that on.
Thanks.
And I'll just jump in, Sarah, with something brief, because such good points were raised. What we learned at Upward is, you know, and it was a humbling realization, is that from the first day we were open to everyone and welcomed everyone, and our programs were for everyone. And we're downtown, you know, the North End is right next door. And still, it was, you know, you didn't get enough of diversity that you wanted. And really what we're actually working now, I can't really give the details because it's pre-announcement, but our partner Shelbourne has purchased the old Fuller Brush building in the North End. And together we're actually building programs and for the North End community. And it's around job training, and it's around entrepreneurship in that community. So it's for the community, in the community, and how to create opportunities, not only for them there, but you know, because the most important thing for us is that we're not two separate communities, we're one. And there's this invisible bridge that no one, you know, can cross, and it has to be crossed. And Sarah, you guys are in Parkville, so you understand that. We're a tiny city when you take all the neighborhoods, and for some reason it feels like 3 cities, and it can't anymore. And sometimes it's not only goodwill, you have to go in and force that and create hubs that can then work together and support each other. So it's it's something very important, and hopefully in the next few months we'll be able to share more details.
Great examples. Thank you all so much. So I think we do have a couple questions. So Molly is going to jump in to read the first audience question. Molly?
Well, I suppose this is a unique opportunity to mention that Innovation Places is a 5-year authorized program by the legislature. I know that it's something that we're looking to get reauthorized this year, and that would be a way to really push on and keep doing the work that we're doing, supporting small businesses. So it was the legislation that created Innovation Places was very much a bipartisan response to the loss of GE. And we're seeing that kind of grassroots growth coming. And I think that the same bipartisan mentality that created resources like Innovation Places is still there. They still recognize that it's something that we need to be doing as a state. And I'm optimistic that the legislature is here with us and understands us.
And I just want to jump in. I mean, we've had a lot of the legislatures come visit Upward and everything. And I'm sorry, it's still not enough, because yes, they recognize innovation is important. How could you not? But I think I don't know if they're recognizing that it's critical for the state. And I don't think that they're realizing that more has to be done. We've actually ran studies comparing what Connecticut is doing to other states, and other states have been much more innovative in ideas and how to use funds for innovations and to fund more programs. We need, Innovation Places was a good program, but it needs much more funding. And other programs need much more funding. We need to realize that workforce development, the future of it comes under innovation. Apprenticeship programs, a lot of it is sitting under innovation and maybe sitting under other things now. And I welcome the legislatures to come speak with us because, they may be doing things for innovation, but I think that with us, they can do much more.
I think we've definitely seen the support of our state and local governments. Like Wes, District Arts and Education is a recipient of the Innovation Places grant with CTNext, as an innovation collaborative and economic development corporation. So I believe that their heart is in the right place, right? They know that they need to continue supporting these programs. We just need to continue supporting them, but understand what works. Support what works, continue doing that. Like sometimes we overcomplicate things and try to look for other things that, this is fancy, we can do this. Stick with what works. We know what works. The future for us is looking for partners and philanthropists who understand what we could be doing and how we can partner to create even more of the success that we've seen to date. So sometimes it's just about, we know what works, invest there, keep doing it.
Thank you so much for sharing, guys. We'll definitely work in partnership with the state to kind of keep up these initiatives and focus on what the work that you guys are doing here. If we could just briefly shift the focus. You guys have all emphasized this morning how your organizations rely on startups. Can you just give us some, support and talk about how graduating and upcoming workforce should believe in startups and why they could work here instead of maybe major corporations?
Yeah, startups are the ultimate opportunity to show what you can do. It's you as a person, as a graduate, as a new professional, can have your hands in you can have your fingers in every pie. You can see every part of a business, and you can learn what it means to run or own or be a leader in a business from the first day that you graduate college. And those are impactful and self-development type roles that you can't find in a larger environment where there's less risk. There's certainly a more defined path. But if you're willing and able to go with the undefined path, the personal rewards and the personal growth that you can get working at a startup as a graduate is unparalleled. And on top of that, if you work hard enough, truly, the sky is the limit. You know, every company that exists now on the Fortune 500 was a startup at one time. And so you work hard enough, you put it in, and you believe in yourself in the path, and the less trodden path, then the rewards are certainly there.
We're also seeing that a lot of corporates are hiring startup employees because they have broader vision. So many students think it looks better if I go work for a corporate for a few years. It looks better on my resume. Not necessarily anymore. And I just want to mention we have a partnership with University of Hartford where we are matching interns with our startups, and incredible stories are coming out of these startups that are just, you know, within a few months are leading efforts in Connecticut for maybe a startup out of Hong Kong. And they're doing installations and they're meeting with really important people. And so you could have been at a corporate for 20 years before doing something like that. So it's such an incredible opportunity. And I actually think we shouldn't be speaking about it. The interns that are working at these startups should be featured and share their experience compared to others. Because a lot of the universities, when they're doing intern days and matching days, they don't even invite startups. They only invite the Travelers, Aetna, and Cigna of this world. And it's a big mistake. And when we dug deeper, they told us because we think a startup is someone out of a garage and they don't have respect for the word, when actually a startup can be up to 100, 300 employees. So it's sometimes just semantics of people understanding what a startup is. And so I think there's education that needs to be done to the universities and having and highlighting these students that have taken these positions and could not be happier.
Yeah, I would just add that there are two sides to that coin. As someone who is operating a startup, it's a great opportunity to be able to do things that you would not be able to do in, you know, a corporate space. There's a lot more responsibility and a lot more, well, no one's doing that, so I'm going to do it, which creates a lot of opportunities for learning and growth. But I'm also very grateful that as I've been able to be here at District with 95 other startups, that there is a real sense of you can't do it all. Like, make sure that you're taking care of yourself in that process. And I think that's why communities like this are so important, whether in person or virtual, to sort of right size, you know, work, especially as it, you know, has grown in the pandemic when you're on your computer all the time. And so there really is no start or end time. So I would just add that little piece there for those who are being hired.
Wonderful. Well, I so appreciate all of this, and I wish we could go on for hours. I know there's a lot to keep diving into, but unfortunately we do have to wrap up. I want to just thank again our esteemed panelists, Shana, JoHannah, and Wesley. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm happy to be, I think, ending on a very optimistic note with this sentiment. I think we've got a lot of work to do, but certainly a lot of great assets in our state and the power to pull it off. So I just really appreciate all of the perspectives that you've shared. And thanks again to CBIA for having us all this morning.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wes, JoHannah, Shana, and Sarah, for that engaging discussion. You know, it's always interesting to learn more about the complex business ecosystems that exist in Connecticut. And an important reminder that we should all be working together to build those bridges and establish Connecticut as a true innovation hub. Innovation is driving spectacular outcomes with the COVID-19 vaccines. Suddenly a world without COVID, free to operate at 100% capacity, free of masks, quarantine, travel restrictions, and school closures, it's well within our reach. Pfizer has a significant Connecticut footprint and is at the forefront of vaccine development along with its German partner BioNTech. In just 10 months, Pfizer has done what normally takes 10 to 13 years. Bring a vaccine from development to regulatory approval to widespread distribution, not to mention a vaccine that is more than 95% effective. That's incredible to think about that. In 10 months, they've done what we can do in 13 years. It's an incredible achievement. Pfizer Biopharmaceuticals Group President Angela Hwang will be joining us now to share that story and its impact on the public health and the economy. And she'll be joined by Connecticut Bioscience Growth Council Executive Director Paul Pescatello. We are so very fortunate in Connecticut to have such a great corporate citizen as Pfizer. As I said in my opening remarks about Webster Bank, we are committed at CBIA to spotlighting and highlighting the great things our Connecticut businesses do for our communities, for our state, and our economy as a whole. There's so much more than just creating jobs, which is important enough. Our businesses are the heartbeat of our communities and our state. They do so much with their staff and employees volunteering, philanthropy and local organizations, whether it's from T-ball and Little League, to playbills at your high school theater, to soup kitchens and food banks, and all that they do for the communities. They are such big advocates in what we need to do to grow our economy. So let me turn it over now to Paul and Angela. Good morning, both of you.
Hey, good morning. Thanks so much, Chris. And good morning to the audience, CBIA audience. It's an understatement to say the novel coronavirus has upended our world. We all want answers, and we all want to bring this pandemic to an end as soon as possible. We want it in the rearview mirror. So we're so fortunate today to have Angela Hwang with us from Pfizer. Angela is president of the Pfizer Biopharmaceuticals Group. She's also a member of the Pfizer executive team. Of course, Pfizer has a long history of innovation in Connecticut, and including a huge R&D presence in Groton. The Pfizer businesses that Angela leads focus on cancer, rare diseases, inflammation and immunology, infectious diseases, and so important to our discussion today, vaccines. So welcome, Angela, and if you could just give us a few minutes of background about your work at Pfizer, and you're a Connecticut resident.
A real pleasure. As you say, first and foremost, I am a Connecticut resident, so just feeling thrilled to be here to represent our state and talk about the great work that is happening here. But by way of background, as you said, I am the group president for Pfizer Biopharmaceuticals. And what that is that it is the commercial arm of Pfizer. It is a unit where all of the businesses for Pfizer sit. Simply put, this is the revenue generating arm for Pfizer. So I have about 26,000 colleagues around the world that are part of the biopharma group. We operate in over 125 countries. I'm headquartered in New York. I live in Connecticut. Our colleagues and the leaders that work for me, there are 8 of them, and each one of them owns a piece of their business by therapeutic area. So we have a head of oncology, as you mentioned, we have a head of inflammation immunology, we have a head of vaccines, so on and so forth. And all of these businesses together cumulatively is what creates the biopharma group. So the COVID vaccine, which I know we're going to be talking about today, is a part of our portfolio. And we, beyond the vaccines business unit, it has been an all-in effort by everyone at Pfizer, our CEO, our executive leadership team, really just thousands of people who have mobilized to be able to bring this important medicine to the world.
Well, that's great. So let's start by talking about how did Pfizer decide to dive in and mobilize to combat COVID and develop a vaccine?
In March, actually it was March 15th, before we even had decided to move into the vaccine space, Pfizer had implemented and put out what we call the 5-point plan. And that was really our outreach to the scientific community to say, and the industry to say, we are here to offer our expertise in vaccines or elsewhere, as well as any of our resources to collaborate with the industry to ensure that we were able to manage both treatments as well as vaccines for the world. So it sort of began with something that was broad, but actually very soon after that, we then declared that we were going to begin our own vaccine program. And that was really enabled by a collaboration that we had already had with a company, a biotech company in Germany called BioNTech. In 2018, we had began a partnership for the purposes of developing a flu vaccine, actually. But when this moment came, we were already in lockstep and in partnership on a different program, and that really is what enabled us to pivot from flu over to COVID. And so this mRNA technology, which was the basis of our collaboration, became, the pivot point and the place where we began to do our work. First of all, animal studies, but then very quickly into human studies to really try to understand whether we could create an mRNA vaccine that would be effective for the COVID virus. So things then moved rather quickly, and we worked closely with BioNTech to further develop this vaccine. We actually had put 4 candidates all at once into testing so that we would have multiple opportunities to see which would be the best vaccine or the best vaccine candidate. And Pfizer then brought forward also its very, very robust clinical development, our clinical trials process to this collaboration, as well as our manufacturing processes. And so it's all of these things coming together that enabled us to not only develop the vaccine, but at the same time start manufacturing the vaccine, and at the same time from the commercial perspective, begin the contracting of this vaccine with potential governments, because the contracts would be the enabler of what it enables us to supply the vaccine once registered and once launched. So, like I was saying, like this was really an all-out effort by so many and all the different departments, research, manufacturing, commercial, all coming together so that we could be ready for this day when the vaccine was potentially approved.
And other research projects, and so in all the other disease areas that Pfizer is working on, cancer, heart disease, neurology, did you have to sideline those in order to focus on the COVID vaccine?
Fortunately, no. We did not. We have, obviously we have the strength of Pfizer behind us, and what we were able to do was to continue all of our programs. We met all the deadlines that we had for all of our programs. Of course, along the way, any delays experienced were really a function of the pandemic and the fact that maybe some of our other programs couldn't recruit as fast as they had wanted to because the patients, right, were under restrictions, either lockdown or whatever it was. So I think we were, if there was any effect or any impact, it was the broader impact from the pandemic in general, but not a function of the decision that we made to start a COVID program. So as you can imagine, in order for that to not happen, to keep all of our programs going on track, and we met all the deadlines and caught up with everything by the end of the year. I think you can see just how much and how much every individual who was working on the program had to give, because for some of us, we were doing our old job as well as this new job, and that probably was most of us. But we did it because this is something that we all felt so passionately about. And we knew that this would be important for the world. If I think about our purpose here at Pfizer, it's breakthroughs that change patients' lives. And there is not a moment greater than this pandemic to demonstrate how Pfizer could play a part in creating a breakthrough that could change people's lives. And so it has been, again, just one of an all-out effort by so many people to do their day job as well as many other jobs so that we could pull off this feat. But suffice to say, we've had everything going, which is what's really just remarkable.
Yeah. So you mentioned before your vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, is an mRNA vaccine. So could you explain a little bit how those vaccines work? It's stunning new technology.
is. Essentially, if we were to think about how vaccines are traditionally made, you would typically take a piece of the virus, and you would then use that to elicit an antibody response or an immune response in your body to fight whatever the infection is. This idea is different in that you're not putting any part of the virus in your body, or any part of the virus is not part of the vaccine. Its basis is a genetic sequence. And what that genetic sequence is that it's housed in an RNA. It's an RNA sequence. And as all of us know, RNAs create proteins. And so you put the RNA, you take the RNA, the sequence that you are trying to replicate. In this case, we chose the spike protein of the coronavirus as the sequence that we had wanted to be able to replicate. We put that in a lipid nanoparticle. The lipid nanoparticle is the basis of the vaccine. Once inside your body then reads that genetic code and creates the protein. So it almost, in a way, I would say, creates that the spike protein. And then your body creates the antibodies against that spike protein. And so if and when you get infected, or if you were exposed to any kind of infection, your body then, the antibodies recognizes the spike protein coming from the coronavirus. And that is how the immunogenicity is created. And so it's really a remarkable technology for a number of reasons. But probably the biggest one is speed, because all you need is a genetic sequence. We are able to follow the evolution of any virus, but in this case, the coronavirus. And you've heard a lot recently about new variants. And by following the genetic sequence, we are able then to be able to produce either a new vaccine, if that's what's necessary. So this is what the mRNA technology is, what allows us to really reduce the time to develop a new vaccine, as well as be able to manufacture it, because there are also benefits from a manufacturing perspective when you are developing, when you're using the mRNA technology to produce capacity. So for a number of reasons, the mRNA technology became really the perfect one to be used in a pandemic because of the speed by which you can track the evolution of the virus, the speed by which you can develop a vaccine, but also the speed by which you can manufacture a vaccine.
In some sense, the mRNA vaccine speeds up, or is part of the manufacturing process. And I was going to say that almost as difficult as developing is discovering a new medicine, a new vaccine, like for this COVID-19, is the manufacturing, the nuts and bolts manufacturing and the distribution of the vaccine. And I wish if you could just talk a little bit about the Pfizer infrastructure that made that happen, that made the manufacturing. You talked about the clinical trials, which I think was pretty much unprecedented to start manufacturing in such quantity the vaccine during the clinical trials, which of course, there was a lot of risk there. So if you could talk about that for a moment.
Key word, Paul, which is about risk-taking. And actually, it was this risk-taking and very different ways that we made decisions in our company that enabled us to manufacture the vaccine at such rapid pace. But it began with the assumption that we would have a vaccine. And so very early on, we began buying the glass vials, the tubing, the raw materials that we believed we would need before we actually even knew which candidate it was going to be, right? So the manufacturing process began, a really long time ago, and it began with the assumption that we would get there and that we made a bet that we would have a vaccine. And that was important because there was just no time for us to make decisions in a sequential way where you wait for, typically you would wait for a milestone from a clinical trial to inform whether you would move to the next step. And because we didn't have that time, we just made the assumption that it's a go and now let's just make it. So I would say that's the first part of our manufacturing process. I think the second thing to remember, and where Pfizer is unique, is that we've been in the vaccine business for over 130 years. And so in the development and the manufacturing of this new vaccine, we leverage the entire Pfizer manufacturing network. We already make vaccines in many places around the world. So one of the places that that we're using for vaccine production right now is Puurs in Belgium. That is our largest manufacturing site for Prevnar 13, one of the blockbuster vaccines that we have in our portfolio. And Kalamazoo, our site here in Michigan, is another site where they have tremendous expertise in biologics manufacturing. And so we were able to also, within our own network, very quickly select places and locations where we already had the expertise, the infrastructure, enough infrastructure, so that we had a strong place to start off from. But of course, this, as you mentioned, technology. And so we didn't have anything that could make this mRNA vaccine. Everything was bespoke and everything had to be designed from scratch. So using a footprint that we already had, we were then able to build on top of that to say, okay, what in addition to that do we need that needs to be customized? What's the engineering? What's the, again, the machinery, the infrastructure that we need? And so that was built in record time over the last several months. Again, helped by the fact that we are vaccine manufacturers today. We already have a supply chain that was well established. We did need new components, but at least we were in a very, very strong place to start. And that helped us a lot. Along the way.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go on.
Of the manufacturing comes, the other part of manufacturing innovation came in the design of the thermal shippers, which became an important part of the process as well. And that was also new, and also a huge innovation. We realized that these lipid nanoparticles needed to be kept at ultra cold temperatures in order to stabilize the lipid nanoparticles. And so therein became another design element, but we were able to get up to, we were able to do this really, very, very quickly, and design a storage box that was able to, that we would be able to use commercially, and to be able to use that as a shipper to anywhere in the world. And so, the process has been one of that was, I would say, was built off of existing expertise and existing infrastructure, but really had to bring in completely new elements that were unique to this vaccine.
So mRNA technology, as I said, it's such innovation. What's the future for it? I mean, so are there other applications for it, other vaccines to use that technology, and for other disease areas?
Actually, the mRNA technology and the collaboration that we had with BioNTech was first and foremost one that was targeted to flu. So there are applications beyond it, because that's sort of where we began. But actually, if I were to step back even beyond that, BioNTech as a company had been experimenting with the mRNA technology for oncology. And so we are very excited about the potential future of what this technology platform can mean in terms of its application to COVID and any other variations of COVID or a completely new virus for COVID. We're extremely excited about its application in infectious disease. I've already talked about flu, but I think it opens the opportunity for other forms of infectious disease. And then, of course, we're very excited about what it can do in other areas like oncology. So I think that the launch of this COVID vaccine was our proof of concept for the application of this in broad settings. And I think now, the world and the field is open for us to continue to study this and see where else it could apply and where the needs are.
So innovation really seems to be the key. And so I guess I'd like to find out a little bit more about how you identified BioNTech as an innovation partner, and going forward, how do you keep the innovation engine going, so to speak?
Well, I think, for BioNTech, we had met each other through the interest in mRNA technology and the realization that we could partner with each other on flu. BioNTech originally was focused on oncology, and I think it was the bringing together of both of our companies that helped us to realize that there was an application in infectious disease. And so I think that collaboration has been extraordinarily fruitful. It's one where both our companies have very common shared values about what's important to us. And I think that beyond the science and the expertise, it's the fact that we're just passionate about the same things, which is to bring goodness to the world, that really enabled us to work together very quickly. I think in terms of innovation, if there's one thing that we've learned through this pandemic is that we all, a lesson learned from all of this is that fostering an environment where innovation can thrive and where science can thrive is really important. Because if it weren't for the fact that there was already work going on in mRNA and that we were advanced, or not just we, but companies like BioNTech were as advanced as they were, it would have taken us a whole lot longer to come up with this solution. And so the ability to create an environment in our countries, the ability for all of us as an industry group to foster innovation and allow companies to innovate, whether it's startups or whether it's big companies like ours. I think that's been a huge learning coming out of this pandemic, is that there are solutions in the science, but we have to let the science go to the places where it needs to go, and that it takes time, it takes investment, and it takes people, coming together with a vision for what it is that we'd like to create together. So I think that this pandemic has taught us a lot about how innovation can pay off. But I think where the hard work is at is that we need to invest in that innovation in order to give it a chance.
So as so many of us in the industry know, it takes about $2.7 billion and somewhere upwards of 12 to 15 years to develop a new medicine. Has the COVID vaccine research, has it changed that paradigm? Is it now going to be a shorter time frame from sort of idea to FDA approved product?
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure, this vaccine program has taught us a lot about where time is spent and where time can be shortened. So I definitely think that we will all move forward from a development perspective and look at it in a different way, and now have an even clearer sense of where the points of acceleration might be and where the white space is that we can shorten. And I definitely think we've learned all of that. I also think, though, there is a part of this program that is different from all other programs. And what was unique about this is what I had spoken about earlier, which was the risk-taking. Typically, we wouldn't, you wouldn't go out with a $1 billion investment, not knowing whether you have a candidate or not, and start making it, manufacturing it. We put 4 candidates into the field all at once. And again, for those of us who are in the industry, you would rarely, you would typically not do that. You would try and study, you would pick one, you would study it, and you would let your milestones, right? You would reach certain milestones, and then you would make decisions at each one of those milestone points, but you wouldn't go all out at once in parallel and go at risk for every element of this development program. So I think in the end, the balance is going to be somewhere in between. I think as a company, we've learned some things that are no regret moves and you should apply always. Like I said, there are processes that we can change. There are technologies that we learn to use in this COVID development program, digital technologies and other things that we had to use because we had no option but to do that. But now those will be able to apply on a day-to-day basis to speed up our development programs. But then this extra element of, where can you go all out and take everything and every program at risk, and to be able to take this sort of financial investment at the scale all the time? I think that is probably, not going to happen all of the time. And so I think coming out of this, as I think about our portfolio, certainly there's an opportunity for us to say within the portfolio of pipeline products that we're looking at, which of these have elements where this kind of acceleration is going to be important and worthwhile, and which ones are not. So I think that's one huge element. I think the other element that we didn't talk about today yet is obviously our collaboration with regulators, and that was another huge point of acceleration. And that though we've also learned a lot, I think, both from the regulator perspective and also from the company perspective, in terms of where are the areas that can be sped up and which are the areas that still require the time that they do. And so not all of this was in our control. It was also our collaboration with the regulators and how we worked with them, and how real time those discussions were. Typically, all of us who in this industry know that there are certain sort of meetings and certain formal processes that you follow to develop a drug. But in this instance, it was real-time communication all the time, every day, multiple times a day, with regulators around the world, so that we could make these decisions, in the moment. So I think that's another element that needs to be considered as we think about the future.
Great to hear, and I have to say that I think the collaboration is unprecedented among the biopharma companies and the biopharma companies with government. So that's great to hear. We are just about out of time. Angela, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I want to thank our audience too for their attention and being part of this conference. So thank you again, and I'll turn it back to Chris.
Thank you, Angela and Paul. As I said earlier, what Pfizer has done in less than a year is just incredible. A real testament to how innovation shapes dramatic outcomes with benefits for so many of us. And I'm looking forward to the day when I can roll up my sleeve and get the vaccine. The Metro Hartford Alliance is a valuable partner for CBIA and plays an essential role in promoting and driving economic growth in the greater Hartford area. And what has happened in Hartford in recent years, with growing confidence among business leaders and real collaboration between the public and private sectors, driving investment in the city, is perhaps a model for other cities in Connecticut. An important lesson: we cannot rebuild the state's economy without our cities. And here's David Griggs, the Alliance's president and CEO, to talk more about the Hartford comeback. David, good morning. Great to see you. Happy New Year.
Good morning, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks again for being our partner in this event, and we look forward to hearing your remarks.
Always proud to co-sponsor this with you, and thank you again for putting this on. It's been a whirlwind of a morning for sure.
We've had a great agenda, and really appreciate you coming on and closing us out, and really appreciate everything you've done for growing the Hartford region. It's so critical to our success in Connecticut. So go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. And before I get too far in, thank you as well to Webster Bank for your commitment to this event, our region, and our state. It is very much appreciated. And like Chris, I think you would concur, we can't do this without you. So thank you very much. And thank you to the CBIA team for another great summit. As I think about the 12 months that have passed since our last annual economic summit, I think it's fair to say that we've all learned a lot. Mere weeks after we took our leave from the Marriott Ballroom, feeling confident that 2020 was all systems go, every company in Connecticut had to shift into new workplace models, alter operating procedures to ever-changing guidelines and regulations. The pandemic taught us many things, but for me, it taught us that while we call ourselves the land of steady habits, we can change. In fact, as I reflect on the nearly 3 years that I've been at MHA, I've seen tremendous change in our region. Hartford has a new neighborhood. An area we used to call the Central Business District is now an emerging downtown neighborhood. And this neighborhood has attracted hundreds of new residents to the city. Residents that, according to CRDA data, are also overwhelmingly new to Connecticut. To the private developers, the CRDA, the banks that are providing the lending support, as well as the multiple partners that are helping to make this transformation possible, thank you. Speaking of new to Connecticut, Hartford was just named as the 5th most popular destination for where tech talent is locating. And our housing market has been consistently ranked as one of America's hottest markets through the last half of 2020. And while the naysayers will point to limited data points from moving companies, make no mistake, we are gaining new residents. And it's incumbent upon all of us to welcome these new transplants. So when you see that New York license plate at the home down the street that sold before a sign even hit the front lawn, stop by and say hello. Tell them your favorite coffee shop, your favorite restaurant. Better yet, tell them your secret parking spot for your favorite hike. We all need to welcome our new residents because they represent our future growth. The residential scene is not the only sector that our region has experienced changes. On the economic development front, I have seen similar transformations. We have a new administration at the state level, and with that, a new DECD. A DECD that is appropriately aggressive, focused, and every bit a great partner for MHA. Add to that a new statewide marketing effort through Advanced CT, another great partner for MHA. And I would be completely remiss to leave out today's host, CBIA, and the true partnership that MHA enjoys with Chris and his team. What I've just described is the national best practice in economic development. A statewide effort where marketing and fiduciary responsibilities are separated, partnered closely with regional business and marketing efforts like MHA to attract, retain, and grow companies. Couple all of that with the statewide lobbying organization, and we now have in Connecticut a best practice for economic development, a framework on which success has been built in state after state. And again, I know there are naysayers. Our taxes are too high, our regulations are too onerous. We can never win. Let me be clear, lower our taxes, reduce our regulations. I completely agree. However, that does not mean we cannot compete. In fact, MHA with our good friends at CohnReznick recently conducted an effective tax rate study comparing Hartford to Boston and New York for an office expansion, and Windsor, Connecticut to Columbus, Ohio, Charlotte, North Carolina, Plano, Texas, and Tysons, Virginia for a manufacturing expansion. Why did we pick these cities? Because we know these are the communities we compete against in many of our target industries. And what we found is that we can compete. On the office side, Boston is twice as expensive, and New York nearly 3 times more expensive. And all of that is before wages enter into the equation. On the manufacturing side, we were bested by only North Carolina, and not by much. I also agree that taxes represent only one of the dozens of criteria a company uses to select new sites, and we need to be competitive in all of them to win. In the end, if 2020 taught us anything, is that what we thought we knew, it is only as good as yesterday. Paradigms we thought were impossible to change, changed. Connecticut does not have to be the land of steady habits. We can compete for jobs and talent. We can build new neighborhoods. We can change the way we pursue economic development, and we can win. Thank you for your participation this morning in this annual event. I can't wait to see what we are talking about 12 months from now.
We have been occupied by the British. We've survived recessions, depressions, prohibition, and even previous pandemics. But this is our greatest challenge. We'll survive because of our staff, our community, and our bank. When the PPP program was announced by the U.S. Treasury, it was Webster that educated us and executed for us. We will emerge stronger and better, and our customers will come home.